It's a brisk February afternoon. Ronald and Tara Keller are making their way towards Kingston Circle, a remote area in Teller County, Colorado.
How much farther till we get there?
Should be close.
They wanted to go check out some property south of a little town called Divide. And it's high, it's way up in the mountains.
Wow. So beautiful up here.
Yeah, and deserted too. I haven't seen another car in over an hour.
And so they're going down this road.
That's weird.
And they saw a car. So they stopped and got out and approached the car.
Oh, I should have brought another coat.
And at that altitude, February is freezing.
Car looks abandoned, doesn't it?
Maybe they're up here checking out the land.
Wait, what's that?
Where?
That.
They thought they saw something that didn't look right. And then as they got closer still, it appeared to be a human.
Oh, geez, she's dead.
Oh my God!
She appeared to have been there for several days.
Across the county line, El Paso District Attorney investigators Larry Martin and Mark Kors are relaxing after a long week of work.
Mark and I lived together probably no more than 5 or 6 months at the max, and it was a good living arrangement.
Got any plans tomorrow?
Thought maybe I'd take it easy, drink a few beers.
I had just started probably a month before this particular case as an investigator for the El Paso County DA's office.
Hey, you deserve it after the week we put you through.
Larry Martin was not only a good friend of mine, but Larry was also my mentor.
Hello, this is Martin. Really? Way up there?
Teller County reports that they have found the body of a deceased female off a mountain highway in the middle of nowhere.
Well, right away, it threw up a red flag. We could be looking at a homicide here.
Located just beyond Colorado's majestic Pikes Peak, it takes Martin and Core over an hour to make it to the crime scene.
There's no gas stations, no businesses of any kind. There's no place to go and no reason to go there.
Hey, Larry.
Man, it's a cold one tonight.
You're telling me, and it's dark as hell up here.
Yeah, when I first arrived on scene, I was contacted by the undersheriff of the Teller County Sheriff's Department.
This is Mark Kors. He's new to our team.
Howdy. Good to have you.
He tells them that they have found the body of a middle-aged white female face down on the ground 40 yards off of the highway.
Is that our victim's car?
Possibly. We're pulling a name off the plates right now to see who it belongs to.
And at that time, it was suspected that the car and the body were somehow connected.
The coroner's on his way up here, so we haven't touched anything yet.
All right, well, let's take a look at our Jane Doe.
So I was taken over and shown where the body had been found.
There she is.
Where's her coat?
Yeah, strange, huh? From our initial observance, there didn't appear to be any blood evidence visible, and there's no ID on her.
It just looked very suspicious that something occurred to cause this lady to go down.
Looks like she's been here at least a few days.
Yeah, rigor mortis to set in.
Rigor mortis, it passes relatively quickly, a day or two, but being it's wintertime, perhaps the body is frozen.
Hey, fellas. Hey, Doc.
The coroner arrives on scene and gets to work.
The nice thing about the cold weather is that it's like putting a body in a cooler. It can preserve the body, and so it's not as decomposed as it would be if it was laying in the heat.
He examined the body, and he too indicated that he found no other signs of trauma to the body.
So there's nothing obvious? Without an autopsy, I can't give you a cause of death.
Okay. Let's go see what else we can dig up.
Got it.
Thanks, Doc.
I wanted to look around the area to see, what evidence, if any, was there, but it was dark.
You could step off a cliff and fall 1,000 feet to your death and not realize it's happening until it's too late.
We gotta wait till morning. Let's go on ahead and tape off this whole area. We'll set up a team to come up at first light, see if we can find any physical evidence.
Copy that.
Thanks.
So what next?
Well, there's one thing we can look into.
maybe that car can give us some idea about who this particular person is and what may have happened to her.
All the doors are locked, and no keys are found around the car or around this body that was discovered. So where are the keys for this car? No one knows.
But we were able to notice that there was a purse sitting on the front seat.
Excuse me, detectives. Got a hit on that plate.
The car registers to a Madeline Proctor, who is 54 years old.
Let's call in for a search warrant.
Morning.
We've got a lot of legal precautions because we still don't know exactly who the owner is and if they might actually be the suspect in the case.
Within the hour, investigators get the green light to search the vehicle.
That stinks.
Right away, we smell a distinct odor of stale alcohol.
And there are 4 empty wine cooler bottles on the back seat, and they're still got some little bit of liquid in the base.
There's no damage to the car, so they didn't crash land here.
And it's got a full tank of gas. So why did they pull over here? Well, let's see whose purse this is.
So the officers open the purse.
Think that's our Jane Doe?
They find a Colorado driver's license in the name of Madeline Proctor, the registered owner of the car.
It's definitely her. Her address is listed in Colorado Springs.
Why is this person on this remote mountain road 70 miles from home?
I think I know somebody who can help us with this.
It was obvious that we needed to call the Colorado Springs Police Department, ask for some assistance.
It's Kenda.
Hey, Joe, it's Larry. You got a minute?
Of course, what's going on?
I need you to run a name for me.
Sure, what's the name?
Madeline Proctor.
So I said, this is the lady we found on the side of the road.
All right, hang on a second. Let me see if I can find it in the database.
Larry and I have worked together and known each other for 30 years. We commonly worked murders together and separately. So in my computer, I determined that Madeline Proctor was listed as a missing person.
And I think I got a file on her. Hang on a second.
Sure, take your time.
I looked up the report, which I kept in my office.
Now, this is interesting. She's reported missing 5 days ago by her husband, Bob.
Really?
Oh, wow.
What's that?
So I tell Larry, I said, there's another complication here. I see a connected report.
Madeline's daughter, Elizabeth Barnes, was reported missing by her husband 5 days ago as well. 26 years old, currently enrolled in the nursing program.
You got a mother and an adult daughter, both reported missing by their respective husbands 5 days prior to this body being found.
Well, that's odd. We didn't find a trace of her up here at the crime scene.
The first people that would be suspects in any missing persons case would be the husbands, or if it were the other way around, the wives. They're just statistically the most likely to have made that person missing. And so to have 2 of them filing missing persons reports on 2 separate people would be unusual. It would be peculiar, and you would want to determine if they had a relationship with motive to want to get rid of these 2 women, if they were friendly at all. I mean, perhaps they were not. Perhaps one was setting the other up. Also a possibility.
Now we know it's even more complicated than we thought. Where is Elizabeth Barnes? We're investigating the death of 54-year-old Madeline Proctor in Teller County. I've discovered 2 missing persons reports that are connected, one involving Mrs. Proctor and the other involving her daughter, Elizabeth Barnes. We don't know where Elizabeth Barnes is or how they both came to be missing at the same time.
Well, once we find out that Bob Proctor, the husband of Madeline, had filed a missing person report, we need to go talk to him.
Ready?
Sure.
Well, when we first contacted Bob,
hello,
we let him know that we were there in relation to the missing person report he filed.
did you find her and Liz? Are they okay?
I think we should discuss this inside.
And you could see it in Bob's face,
Yeah, okay.
which in some ways is good for him. No prior knowledge.
Oh, you can just move that stuff anywhere. I haven't been able to keep up on cleaning since Madeline disappeared.
It's okay.
He is distressed before we say a word.
So how long have you two been married?
See, we got divorced about 10 years ago, but we still live together. You guys must think that's a little weird, right?
Well, that makes you a little more interesting than you were 5 minutes ago.
I mean, I guess it just works for us.
I come from a family where my parents were divorced. They always remained friendly. We spent, even when there were other spouses involved, we spent most holidays together. And they very much co-parented. They had kids together, as this couple did. They had a daughter together. And so they just didn't have anger toward one another. It sounded like they'd maintained a friendship, and he was being nurturant toward her.
He said that after the divorce, Madeline actually joined the Peace Corps and went to Africa for several years.
I needed some help with the bills, so I got a roommate. She works a lot. She's never around much.
And what's her name?
Hannah Thompson. Anyway, things got complicated once Madeline got sick.
Bob says Mrs. Proctor contracted the disease malaria, which is very common in Africa, and she became extremely ill to the point of nearly dying.
So I bought her a plane ticket home and moved her into the spare bedroom.
He was not romantically involved with her, but he still cared about her, and he felt it was his obligation to take care of her in her time of need.
Can I get you another blanket?
No, I'm fine. This tea's perfect.
And how has that been, living together?
Yeah, we got a pretty good thing going.
Hey, Dad.
Hey.
Hey, Mom. How you feeling? I'm still tired, but your dad's been taking great care of me. Good.
Madeline and Elizabeth, her daughter, were very close.
Liz, can I get you anything? Iced tea?
Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you.
And one of the benefits for Bob of having Madeline in his house was that it meant Elizabeth was around more.
He told us that she had gotten over the malaria and she would be moving back out of the house.
So, what can you tell me? Has anyone spoken with them?
It's been my experience and Martin's experience as well. When you do this, don't beat around the bush. We're very sorry to inform you that your wife, Madeline Proctor, is no longer alive.
I'm very sorry.
And what about my Liz?
She's still missing.
He is devastated by this news. He was hopeful we were going to tell him she's fine. She's not fine.
I'm sorry. I need a minute.
Now take your time.
So it takes a while to recover that to some level of conversation. And sometimes it takes 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes an hour. Depends on the person.
So now here you're in the position of you've just given this guy some really bad news, 2 pieces of bad news. Now you have to interrogate him more or less, or at least do some initial questioning. And I'm sure that that doesn't feel good.
Once we calm him down to some degree,
I'm okay.
we start to talk with him about what happened the day of the disappearance.
I know this is difficult for you, but we just have a couple more questions. Can you walk us through what you remember from the day that they disappeared?
Liz came by to pick up her mother. Hey, sweetheart.
Hey.
What you doing here?
I'm just here to pick up Mom, so can't stay long. Mom, you ready? I just need 2 minutes.
Where are you headed?
Oh, just the library.
They said they were going to go to UCCS, which is the University of Colorado, and work on a project they were involved in the library.
See you later, Bob. Bye, Dad. Love you.
Okay, be safe.
I will.
So they took off together, theoretically, to do that.
And they never returned.
When Madeline didn't come home, I figured she just stayed at Liz's.
Then Bob says that the next morning, early, Mike Barnes, who is Elizabeth Barnes' husband, came barging in Bob's door in a panic
and said, hey, she didn't come home.
Well, we called the police. You know, Liz's dog is missing too.
Oh, yeah?
Badger. She loves that little guy. Takes him everywhere.
So now we have 2 women and a dog that are missing. This adds up to what? Well, kidnapping, assault, murder, who knows? All options are on the table.
Mike probably won't shed a tear over Madeline.
And he mentions that Mike Barnes, who is Elizabeth Barnes' husband, really dislikes Madeline because he believes his wife is too close to her and that closeness interferes with his marriage. When Bob says that, it raises an eyebrow. What if Mike decides that he's tired of Madeline and Madeline needs to go into the ground? That's an entirely reasonable possibility.
We found some wine coolers in their car.
What?
Did they like to drink together?
No way.
He said that we're both relatively straight and sober all the time, and he didn't have any reason to believe at all that they would be out drinking.
And Madeline's vision is so bad, she can't even drive. There's no way she could make it up there in the mountains alone.
So if anybody was driving that car, it would have been his daughter, Elizabeth.
Please, you have to find my Liz.
I promise you, we'll do everything we can to find her. Again, I'm very sorry.
At this particular point in the investigation, I think it's important that we go back to where Madeline was found and do a thorough search. Is Liz somewhere on that mountain?
We're gonna need some help out there.
All right, I'll get a team together.
So I arranged for our canine units to respond to assist Teller County in a search for a second person, Elizabeth Barnes, to see if that person is in fact in that area. Canines are trained for a number of different functions. There are attack dogs, there are search dogs, some are cross-trained to both. But the olfactory sense of a dog is hundreds of times greater than that of a human. And our German Shepherds have a remarkable sense of smell. They're trained to be trackers. So we recover something that has that person's scent on it from their home, and the dog's memory kicks in, and he remembers that scent, and then see if the dog can detect that odor in the air or in the area on the ground.
In order to cover as much ground as possible, Martin directs the team to search in a grid pattern.
So it's very organized. It has to be. You can't just wander around and expect to find anything. You have to methodically search.
You got to picture this terrain that we're dealing with here. It's very heavily wooded.
Even in broad daylight, you can become disoriented in 5 minutes. So they've moved out about 100 yards from the car, and we're not finding anything.
Here we go.
We start hearing a little yip.
This way. Hear that? Doesn't smell very good either.
As we get closer, it's obvious there's a human body laying on the ground. And on the chest of this body is this little dog.
Looks like she's been here at least a few days.
Something was feeding on the face of the victim.
Man, that's awful.
Unbelievable.
Oh, God.
It is a horrifying vision that many people have never seen, and they're very distressed by that. We may have found our missing daughter. We have recovered a dead body in Teller County, which turns out to be one Madeline Proctor. We're now present at the scene where we made a gruesome discovery, and we assume this is the missing daughter.
That must be Elizabeth Barnes. And her dog.
This was even hard to report on. She still had her little dog on its leash, on her wrist. It had begun to eat her.
Man, that's awful.
I had never in my life seen anything like this before. I gotta go, guys.
That's quite disgusting, and it overwhelms some of the officers that are there that have never seen something like that.
In its defense, this dog had been stuck without a way to get off of this woman for several days.
What happens is the pet is licking the face, saying, hi, like, wake up. And then, you know, it kind of starts tasting good and they're hungry, right? And so it's a matter of survival.
You can't fault the dog for wanting to remain alive.
Hey, buddy. It's all right. We're just here to help.
Is there a name on the collar?
Yep. Badger. Fitting.
It's remarkable that this dog was able to be there, barking and yapping the whole time, trying to draw attention to itself, and not be attacked and devoured by a coyote or a fox or some other similar animal, which is all over those mountains, including mountain lion, or a bear, for that matter, would come along and dine on both Badger and its owner. But that didn't happen.
We just know that this dog was very traumatized. We also knew that we, quickly as possible, had to remove this dog.
While we wait for the coroner, let's cut the leash and give the dog to the Humane Society.
Okay, and I noticed these over here too.
There's footprints everywhere.
Well, that's a strange pattern.
Footprints can identify people just like fingerprints.
Is this thing going to tell us that she was running from somebody?
You want me to call in our crime lab?
Yeah, that'd be good.
So we're going to get the lab up here to do a proper crime scene search.
Later that day, the coroner updates the team.
In all honesty, there's not very much I can tell you at this point.
He examined the body, and he found no other signs of trauma to the body other than what was obvious to this body's face.
And said the damage was post-mortem, after death, carnivore involvement, i.e. the dog.
I did find this, though.
And he finds a driver's license in the pocket of the jacket of this woman, and it's Elizabeth Barnes.
You know how long she's been deceased?
I'd say probably 7 days or so.
That corresponds with the date they were both reported missing.
We'll have to wait for the autopsy to determine the cause of death.
All right, thank you.
Good luck.
After the victim's body is removed, CSPD's crime lab is given the green light to process the scene.
Now, they've got some pretty good equipment that they set up, and they take measurements, they take GPS locations so that later we can reconstruct the scene as we see it right at that particular moment.
It's not over there.
He sees something twinkle in the dirt and reaches down and determines they're a set of car keys. So if Liz Barnes had the keys to the car, why would she take them with her up into the hills? What if she was attacked and she was running for her life? At this point, anything is possible. So after they conduct that search of those footprints, they report to Martin.
Martin, team's finishing up right now, but we're pretty confident in our findings.
And what's that?
And they tell Martin that those are all belonging to Elizabeth Barnes. Every single print is hers.
She had fallen down several times. She was walking in multiple directions.
It was obvious that there was only one person up on that mountain. The footprints told them that this person appeared to be disorientated.
At some point in time, she was crossing over the same tracks over and over again.
Now, why would you do that?
So the mystery continues. How did Elizabeth Barnes die?
You need to talk to Mike Barnes.
He's still a viable suspect in this investigation. Did she initially run from her husband and then once got up in this particular area, couldn't find her way back out?
Let me know if you need anything. I'm gonna head back to the station.
All right, sounds good.
Thanks for coming down.
Please, have a seat.
Okay. Mike was certainly somebody we wanted to pay attention to in case he might have some criminal involvement in this.
I heard about Madeline. Did you find my wife?
I'm sorry to have to tell you this.
She's dead?
We told him, yes, that we had found Liz and that we had found her deceased in the same general area as we had found Madeline.
Barnes's reaction is somewhat bizarre. He's nervous and fidgety, and his body language is odd.
I'm sorry, I just need a minute.
It's okay. Take your time.
Are you acting oddly just because you're odd, or are you acting that way because you killed her?
So, now what?
We just need to ask you a few questions.
Seriously?
We had to ask him about his relationship with his mother-in-law, Madeline. And we told him we had information that there was some bad blood between the two of them.
It's not that I didn't like her. She was just always around, putting a strain on our marriage.
Can you tell us where you were the day that she disappeared?
Yeah, I was at work. You can call them and check.
Do you mind?
Sure. Excuse me for a moment.
Mike was always concerning to me during this entire investigation because his demeanor was just not consistent with how I would expect a reasonable person to act.
Checks out.
Except for the fact that he had a clear alibi. We could verify through his employer that he had been at work.
I'd never wish any harm on Madeline. We just weren't close. And if I'm being honest, I always thought she was a bad influence on my wife.
Well, what do you mean by that?
It was very strange. I mean, the mom was 54 years old. The daughter was 26. That's not really your pattern for being a bad influence.
Like, for example, the last time I saw Liz, she was all dolled up. Wow. You look nice.
Thanks.
Thought you said you were going to school.
I am. I'm picking up Mom in like 20 minutes.
Mike says it was out of character for his wife to have her hair and makeup done on a general basis, but particularly because she was just saying she was going down to the school library with her mother.
What can you tell us about Liz's school schedule?
Michael said that he's well aware of her activities at school, and she had a mentor named Pete Gosher, who she spent a lot of time with in the library.
They usually met once a week throughout the semester. You don't think he might have had something to do with this, do you?
He said even though that he knew that she was going to the college with her mother, that he felt that she was probably going to meet up with Pete.
Was she having an affair and her mother was covering for her? There was another strange element to the whole thing.
You definitely want him to account for his whereabouts when they went missing. What was going on with him and her at that time?
So now we have a new name. Who is Pete Gosher, and what does he have to do with this disappearance and death of these two women? We don't know the answer to that, but we need to find out. We're investigating the mysterious deaths of 54-year-old Madeline Proctor and her daughter, 26-year-old Elizabeth Barnes. We have uncovered a new person of interest. His name is Pete Gosher that may have had an arrangement to meet with Elizabeth Barnes on the day she disappeared.
Well, now at this point, we want to go talk to people at the college. Did he meet with Liz, and if so, what was the conversation?
Hi.
I'm Detective Mark, and this is Detective Course.
How can I help you?
So they asked her if she remembered seeing Elizabeth Barnes or Madeline Proctor on Friday the 18th.
No, I don't think so, but I mean, that was a while ago.
Do you have a sign-in sheet that I could see just to be sure?
Here it is.
Great, thank you.
Martin checked those sign-in logs for the date of disappearance and found nothing. So the likelihood is great that she was never there.
What about a Pete Gosher?
Oh, yeah. He's right there.
Sure, we'd love to talk to him, so we went over and introduced ourselves.
Excuse me. Are you Pete?
Yeah. What can I help you with? Do you know Madeline Proctor and Liz Barnes? Well, sure, I know Liz.
He said, we're in the same class together, and we work together in the library on projects that are connected to that class. I would call us study buddies.
Fridays are our usual study days. But I feel like she's been blowing school off.
Why is that?
We were supposed to meet 2 weeks ago, and I hung around for an hour, but she never showed up.
And she never called him to tell him that she wasn't showing up, so he was a little put off by that.
Sorry to have to tell you this, but we found the bodies of Liz and her mother up in Teller County.
What? You mean Liz is dead?
I'm afraid so.
We need to know what kind of relationship you and Liz had. Excuse me?
He is generally shocked and insists that it was only a study relationship.
The Friday they disappeared, you were supposed to meet with her. Can you recall what you were doing that day?
Yeah. After the library, I went to a lecture.
And we were able to verify the fact that he was at that lecture. So he's ruled out as anybody involved in the disappearance of these two ladies.
With little to go on, Martin checks in with Kenda at the station.
We're going nowhere fast with this one.
So what do we know so far?
Well, we can eliminate the school, that's for sure.
What if they never planned to go to school that day? What if they lied to their family?
That's an interesting thought.
Let's take a look at the map.
What were they going to, and why are there wine coolers in that car?
Let's see. It's where their house is, right about there.
It's only a few miles from where they resided to the University of Colorado.
And they came up 24.
And yet when they're dead, they're 70 miles plus from where they live.
I think I know where they were headed.
My thought at that point is it's pretty obvious then that they were headed to Cripple Creek.
They probably missed the turn at Divide and got lost.
Well, that would explain why they're all dressed up.
If you're looking for a place for entertainment when you go west out of Colorado Springs, Cripple Creek is going to be the best destination because of the casinos and the limited stakes gambling.
Maybe Liz and Madeline were trying to sneak away for a little bit of fun at the casino and never made it.
Could that be? Yes. Could they have met somebody in Cripple Creek and things went south? Yeah, they could have done that too.
It's Kenda.
I get a call and it's the coroner's office. He said the autopsy examinations are complete.
Good news. The coroner's determined to cause the death.
Great, let's go.
The ultimate question in this case, if someone murdered Madeline Proctor and her daughter, Elizabeth Barnes, how did they do that? By what means did they cause their death?
Hey, Doc.
Hey, detectives, thanks for coming down so quickly.
So what do we know?
Well, I have to say, this is a really strange case.
There was no outward signs of trauma to either body other than the dog eating part of the face of Liz.
So there's no bruising, there's no punctures, there's no hypodermic marks, there's no gunshot wounds, there's no stab wounds.
Well, something had to kill him.
And so we're left wondering what happened to these women. Sometimes the answer lies in the toxicology findings.
The tox screen came back with a mild level of alcohol, but more importantly, there's a high dose of something else in their system.
Really?
What could that be? Are we dealing with two people who are drugged?
Have you heard of the new medication Zoloft?
Zoloft is an antidepressant known as a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And in 1994, this is still a pretty new medication.
Doctors are starting to prescribe it to help combat depression.
And physicians didn't know as much as we know now about the medication.
So could they have overdosed on it?
Based on the tox screen, I don't think so, but it could have altered their mindset.
For these women to combine it with alcohol and then to go up into the mountains and have the change of elevation can really cause some concerning side effects.
Even the coroner says that that would likely cause disorientation and confusion.
Well, how'd they get their hands on it?
Our investigation showed that there was no Zoloft prescribed to either of the two of them, so then we became concerned about where did it come from.
Could it be in the Proctor home?
Police return to the house and find ex-husband Bob Proctor and roommate Hannah Thompson home. Both give permission to search the property.
It's all about the reasonableness of your search, particularly under consent. You don't want to destroy somebody's home. You want to be very careful.
Bingo.
And lo and behold, prescription bottles.
Hannah Thompson.
But these antidepressants were prescribed to Bob's roommate.
The discovery of that bottle with her name on it, Hannah Thompson, makes her a potential player in this event.
What can you tell us about the night that they disappeared?
Well, I remember talking to Madeline briefly, and she seemed like she was in a good mood. And she looked really nice.
And she also said that she was wearing makeup, had her hair done, and was nicely dressed. But Hannah didn't think anything of that and just said it seemed quite normal to me. So now we're back to this point where now Martin is talking to her with one eyebrow raised.
What can you tell us about these?
So when Martin produces this bottle of antidepressant, Hannah's face drops.
Oh, where did you get this?
From your medicine cabinet.
She admitted that she'd been having some problems with depression and had gone to the doctor to prescribe these for her.
Have you ever given any pills to Liz or Madeline?
No, of course not. But
Hannah says, you know, I've noticed for some time now that there are some pills missing from these bottles.
I suspected Madeline had been stealing my pills.
Why would Madeline Proctor steal these drugs, and why would she give them to her daughter?
We'll never have that answer. But taking those medications on top of drinking those wine coolers and driving up to the mountains apparently caused a problem with both of them.
Later that week, the coroner makes his final ruling on the case.
Well, there you have it.
The ruling of the death was accidental.
You're kidding.
Primary cause, exposure. Secondary cause, hypothermia.
You know, working a case like this, you want to come to a conclusion. We'll never have all the answers that we want, and that's sad.
While no one will ever know what really happened to Madeline and her daughter Elizabeth, Kenda and Martin have a theory.
It's obvious that the two ladies had a plan that evening. They were going to go out,
See you later, Bob.
have some fun.
Okay, be safe.
I will.
They are lying about where they're going and lying about what they're going to do.
I can't believe they bought it. Right, Badger?
And for whatever reason, through habit, through oversight, Badger came along.
Yeah, the dog thing is really a question. But, like, why, if you were going out someplace and you were dressed up in the winter, would you bring your dog? On the other hand, you know, maybe she did the Paris Hilton thing and she just, like, kept the dog in her purse. Who knows? But you wouldn't want to leave it in the car for several hours because it would be freezing. So why was the dog there at all?
Viva Cripple Creek.
This probably wasn't the first time they've gone out without telling anyone.
This is delicious. I got something else for you, too. Ooh, what is it? Just a little something to take the edge off. Here.
Madeline at some point introduces the antidepressants to her daughter. What is her motivation? The only one who knows is Madeline, and she can't tell us.
I cannot wait to hit the craps table tonight. If I win big, I can get my own apartment. I'm so tired of having roommates. And then I can visit you all the time. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine.
The elevation approaching Cripple Creek is in excess of 9,000 feet above sea level. Alcohol impact increases with altitude.
Do you know where you're going? Mind your own damn business.
Then mix in some antidepressants, and we have two very confused and very disoriented women.
Maybe we should pull over and check the map. I said I know where I'm going.
I think easily there could have been an argument in the car. God knows it's not that unusual for parents and children to have fights over how the child is driving.
Would you shut up? Mom, can you just stop? He probably has to go to the bathroom or something.
For whatever reason, they consciously stop the car.
Why are you pulling over here? There's nothing for miles. Where else am I supposed to pull over? Okay, okay. Just be careful. Watch out for wild animals. Yeah, okay, Mom.
It was obvious to us that Liz was probably the first one to leave the car. She gets out of the car, she's still got the car keys with her, and she's got her dog with her.
Let's go. Ooh.
And when her daughter doesn't return, Madeline starts to panic.
Liz!
At some point, she gets out of the car.
Liz! Where are you? Elizabeth! Damn it!
When Madeline got out of the car, the door locked behind her, and she had no way to get back in because her daughter had the keys.
And so then she's out in very cold weather and probably in a panic state herself, wondering where her daughter is.
Mom!
Meanwhile, Elizabeth has no idea how to get back to the car and her mother.
She crosses her tracks several times.
It's okay, Badger. I think we just took a wrong turn somewhere.
She gets disoriented. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know where she came from.
Mom! Won't find her.
Trying to figure out where to go. And she can't do that until she literally runs out of gas.
Sorry, Badger. Mama just needs a little break. Elizabeth!
Mom is still at the car, but now she...
It begins with a porch light that never burns out, a rectangle of stubborn gold on a cul-de-sac where the night keeps its secrets and the sprinklers hiss like snakes in the grass. One address, one date, 1998, California. Suburbia ironed flat, the kind of place where the loudest thing after 10 p.m. is the thud of a Sunday paper or a garage door groaning shut. Then a scream sliced that quiet into strips, a sprinting neighbor, a rotary phone jolted awake, sirens uncoiling through the dark like wire. And just like that, headline cadence, breaking news tempo, an ordinary street stepped into the glare and never stepped out again. She was 22 and chronicled in snapshots, a dented Polaroid clipped to a fridge, a university lanyard looped around a rearview mirror, a ticket stub pressed inside a paperback that would never be returned to the library, missing by morning. Mystery disappearance, the anchor said. Shock to the community, the crawl insisted. Patrol cars idled, blue and red painting the stucco. The front door stood ajar like a question. A mug of tea cooled on a coaster that read home. The kettle had clicked off. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just a life interrupted mid-routine, as if someone had pressed pause on a scene and walked off with the remote. Detectives moved in tight formation, the way storm clouds move over a field. Evidence bags swallowed small truths, a loose button, a hair snagged on a splinter, a soft smear on linoleum that could have been anything until the lab whispered otherwise. Reporters rehearsed their lines beside wind-bent hedges. Cold case in the making, an early headline teased. Neighbors offered the usual lines, those innocent hymns of suburbia. She was careful, she kept her porch light on, she never skipped trash day, she waved. But behind the windows, curtains fluttered with rumor. The city pretended to keep driving, the city kept looking back. In the days after, the narrative sprouted ribs. There was the late shift at the cafe on Foothill, the blue Saturn parked 2 feet too straight, the voicemail blinking, one new message, then blinking nothing at all after the family played it, rewound it, played it again and again until the tape sounded like it was made of sand. A dog barked at 1:13 a.m., according to a man who never normally noticed dogs. A porch camera across the street, this was the 90s, grainy, a postage stamp of grayscale, caught a shadow that could have been a man, could have been a trick of the lawn, could have been the night proving it knows how to lie. The case learned to breathe without answers. Flyers curled on telephone poles and shed their staples, the mailbox filled with charity offers and crackpot maps. The family's front garden overflowered. Grief does that. It either kills everything or turns it wild. On anniversaries, the news came back, doing elegy as ritual. 5 years gone, 10 years gone, a countdown that never hit zero. The detectives aged into their suits. The file thickened. New officers inherited it, each believing they'd be the one to thread the needle. The public called it cursed. The parents called it unfinished. The internet, newly loud, called it everything. And then, years later, long after the porch light felt less like hope and more like a stubborn habit, the story didn't so much turn as tilt. A lab across the state upgraded its machines and invited dust to speak. One swab, archived in a box that had learned to be patient, went under the laser. The fluorescence hummed, stripes of data resolved like music sheets nobody knew how to read back then, but now, suddenly, everyone did. A partial profile sharpened, a name didn't appear, not a full one, just a rhythm, just enough to hum along to. Hit to a known offender, the internal memo said. Probable familial proximity, the scientist added, careful as a surgeon, blunt as winter. We have movement, the detective told the family, voice steady but eyes bright, as if steady were a costume he wore for them. Not an answer, he warned, but a door. The door swung on quiet hinges and opened into a map of faces, a tree with branches tangled by time. A certain surname hummed in the record like a low-grade fever. Brothers, cousins, a father who once worked swing shift at a plant that stank of solvents and lies. A nephew who moved out of state and kept changing his cell number. A divorce that turned ugly and left paperwork like glass shards. The past didn't just come back. It came back with a flashlight and a crowbar. They canvassed anew. "Do you remember him?" officers asked, pointing to a photo that kept emerging like a watermark from the edges of this case. "No," one neighbor said, and then, "Wait." Memory is unreliable, but it craves applause. Suddenly, the cul-de-sac remembered a pickup that idled longer than most. A man who always parked under a dead street lamp. The way he watched the cafe door at closing time, pretending to read a newspaper he never turned. People swear they saw the future back when it was still the present. They didn't. But they recognized the echo now. More swabs, more envelopes, more signatures on consent forms. Doors opened reluctantly. Some refused, some bargained, some volunteered with the fervor of the innocent or the wishful or both. The lab spun its quiet spells, peaks on screens, ratios and likelihoods and p-values set like traplines across a midnight field. "We're close," the detective said, but he didn't say it at a press conference. He said it in a hallway that smelled like toner and fatigue. He said it in the family's kitchen, where the corkboard was a calendar of sorrow and coffee lived on the burner like a permanent resident. News crews tuned their scanners. "Cold case thawing," the local affiliate teased. It felt tacky because it was. It also felt accurate, which was worse. The streets tilted toward prophecy. The cafe's regulars spoke in headlines the way people do when a story grows teeth. A retired teacher brought in an old yearbook and tapped a face with a chewed pencil. "Him," she said, not knowing whether she was saving a life or smearing one. A private Facebook group grew by the hour, tags and theories blooming like algae. The detective, aware of all of it, chose the same two weapons he'd always had, patience and paper. They got their warrant on a Tuesday that showed up overcast, as if the sky didn't want to be accused of taking sides. A trash pull behind an apartment complex yielded a coffee cup, a greasy napkin, a cigarette stub, even though the lease said no smoking. The lab put its ear to each item and listened. The result wasn't a drum roll, it was a match, not a maybe, not a cousin of a maybe. A match that clanged through the hallway like a dropped wrench. "Arrest imminent," the email said, and then one word nobody wanted to say too loudly. Solved. But to say solved is to pretend the math is kind. To say it is to ignore the way the human heart negotiates with time. Because even as the cuffs clicked, even as the booking photo flattened a life into one feral frame, the story refused to sit still. The suspect had an alibi shaped like Swiss cheese, a patchwork of time cards, a roommate with selective memory, a cashier who remembered the hat but not the face. The timeline knit neatly in one section and unraveled in another. "Closed for public safety," the chief said on camera, jaw square, voice stiff. Off camera, the detective thumbed the edge of a photo and didn't look up for a long time. They walked the suspect back through 1998, using the interrogation room's fluorescent hum like a metronome. He said he didn't know her name. He said he was never on that street. He said his pickup was at the shop, then remembered the shop had closed in 2003. He said he was set up by people who didn't like him, a list that ran longer than he realized. He asked for a lawyer. He watched the red light on the wall, the tiny dot that means everything now. He started to talk again. Small talk about baseball and traffic and how rent is robbery. He laughed at a joke, and the room winced, the way laughter sounds when it's trying to be a key. Outside, a microphone orchard grew. "Community in shock," banners blared. The cafe changed its tip jar sign to read "Justice Fund," and the jar filled faster than the owner expected. Rage is generous when it needs to be. The family's porch light finally clicked off, then back on, as if it were rehearsing sleep and couldn't quite remember how. The cul-de-sac breathed for the first time in years, then held that breath again, because the arrest was a headline. The rest was a novel, and the novel had too many pages missing. They found something in his storage unit. Of course, there was a storage unit. There always is in these stories. Corrugated metal and dust and the whirring insect choir of summer. Boxes labeled with years like tombstones. Tools that needed a better explanation than the one he gave. A stack of local newspapers the way obsessives keep trophies without admitting that's what they are. No smoking gun. Not yet. But powder in the air, bitter on the tongue. The detective wore gloves the way a priest wears vestments, reverence for the ritual, contempt for the reason it exists. The DA weighed the profile, the trash pull, the unit, the timeline that wobbled but didn't fall, and built a ladder out of it anyway. The community called it justice. The defense called it fantasy. The family called it a chance to sleep through the night without dreams that woke the house. And in the middle of it all, there sat the case file, fat and stubborn, waiting for its new label. Cold case. Solved. A stamp that thunders when it hits paper, a stamp that sometimes lies. Because here's the detail that won't stop humming, the one that threads the needle from 1998 to right now and refuses to break. In the original scene, beside the kettle and the mug and the front door that stood ajar like a half-answered question, there was a note stuck to the fridge by a magnet shaped like the Golden Gate Bridge. 4 words. Sharp pen, no smudges. Back soon, don't wait. Not her handwriting, the sister said. Not her shorthand, the mother insisted. Why write a note if the tea was still steaming? Why write a note if the car keys were still on the counter, if the shoes by the mat were the pair she never left without? The note is the grain of sand. The pearl or the blister grows around it, depending on who you ask. The suspect's prints weren't on it. But there were prints. Not his, not hers, not anybody in the house. Familial proximity, the lab had said. Close but not touching, a surname that hums. A tree with a missing branch. Solved is a generous word. It looks good in ink. It sells. It soothes. But it doesn't turn off the porch light. Not here. Not yet. Not while the note still glints in the evidence sleeve like an eye that never blinks. Not while a second shadow crosses that grainy 1998 camera at 1:16 a.m. A sliver you only notice if you slow the footage and look at the edge of the frame where the night tries to hide. Not while the family keeps a chair at the kitchen table that nobody sits in. Because absence deserves a place to rest, too. So call it solved if you must. Call it closure. Call it justice. Call it the end of the beginning. But listen to the street when it's quiet and you'll hear the aftershock. A hinge creaking in an empty hallway. A radio left on low in a parked car. A kettle clicking off. A porch light insisting on its duty. The case file got a new stamp. The neighborhood didn't. And somewhere in the map of faces, a name is still humming, waiting for someone to follow the tune all the way home. The street wore daylight like makeup that didn't quite fit. Morning newspapers blinked at their own headlines, the ones that shouted solved while the margins hummed with doubt. The detective parked under that dead street lamp, the one neighbors kept mentioning like a landmark in a haunted map. And he sat for a breath longer than necessary, fingers on the wheel, eyes on the porch where the light still fought the sun. He carried the file like a brick. He carried the note like a ghost. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old grief. The mother kept a biscuit tin of buttons, each from a vanished shirt, a private archaeology of things that used to hold fast. On the corkboard, the missing poster had yellowed into a sepia reliquary. We heard, the father said, because the radio had told him before the detective could. They arrested somebody. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He held still, like a photograph deciding whether to develop. Arrest is a step, the detective said. He set the file down and left his palm on it, warm. A big one, but some pieces. He glanced at the magnet shaped like the Golden Gate, the 4 words beneath it. Still don't sit right. The mother moved like a metronome between kettle and cups. She hadn't forgotten how to host, even if every visit was a vigil. He did it, she said, because the city needed her to. She said it the way you say grace over a meal you can't bring yourself to eat. He did it, and we will sleep. Her voice broke on the last word and kept going, because that's what voices do when they've learned to survive themselves. The detective asked for the old diaries, the ones from 1998, not the performative ones kept after the cameras started coming. He wanted the handwriting that wasn't trying to teach anybody a lesson. The sister brought a shoebox with stickers that had once been neon. Inside, ribboned pages, ticket stubs, a pressed wildflower that had lost its color but not its outline, a map to a weekend plan that never arrived. He turned the pages without cracking the spines. Appointments in the margin, a phone number circled twice, the arrow to the cafe, the scribbled, ask for tea, like a note to a future self who never got the chance to ask. He photographed everything. He photographed the negative space between entries. On July 12th, there was nothing. Sometimes nothing screams louder than ink. He left with permission and returned with a forensic camera that saw what eyes chose to miss. Faint indentations on a different page where a heavy hand had pressed on top and left a whisper. The lab would lift it. The lab could lift almost anything now. In 1998, they needed loud evidence. Today, they worship whispers. He passed the diary to the tech and watched it vanish into a chain of custody as precise as choreography. Across town, the cafe frosted its morning buns with a zeal that bordered on piety. People lined up with opinions. We always said it was someone from here. A man in a visor announced to nobody in particular, which is to say everybody. A pair of teenagers took selfies in front of the bulletin board where the missing flyer still clung, and the barista gave them a look that could curdle milk. The detective stood in line, purchased a black coffee because covertness looked silly in daylight, and sat where the angles told him to sit, facing the door, back to the wall, eyes sliding across faces, staying too long on none. T arrived, real name Tegan, hair up in a pencil, the same pencil she used to spin during slow hours in the late shift all those years ago. Back then she was 19 and certain the world would arrive on schedule. Now she was 40-something and carried a private weather system in her shoulders. She remembered the last night. She remembered the way the missing girl's laugh sounded clinky, as if ice were swimming in it. She remembered the pickup, that pickup, the one that idled and trembled like it was trying to hold in a secret. She did not remember a face clearly enough to swear to it. But there was another, she said, her eyes narrowing as if they could sharpen the picture through sheer effort. Another, not him, different standing, different quiet. Different quiet, the detective repeated, because some phrases open doors. He let the silence breathe. She filled it. A man at the corner table, she said, pointing where an empty chair now sat like a stand-in. Back to the window. Didn't stir when chairs scraped. Didn't flinch when the espresso machine hissed like a cat. We closed. He didn't rush. He left as if he were on tape delay, like he lived half a second behind the rest of us. He looked at her once, only once, like he was photographing the moment for later. He left a receipt with nothing on it but a line drawn perfectly straight from edge to edge, not a tip, a line, bold, like he was crossing something out. She paused. We kept weird things back then. We thought we were going to be the generation that solved our own mysteries. I might still have it. The detective didn't blink. Find it, he said, not gently because time was a wolf. She disappeared into the back and returned with a rusted cash box that had survived 2 owners and 1 small fire. Inside, coins that had gone out of circulation, a Polaroid of a Christmas party, a note from a health inspector with a lipstick kiss, and a stack of receipts fastened by a dulled paperclip. She flipped. He watched the years shuffle. There it was, a receipt with a straight black line from left margin to right, hard enough to cut the paper's patience, but not its skin. No name, no signature, date, smudged, but legible. Hour, last. He slid it into an evidence sleeve and felt the hair on his arm salute. Front door or back, he asked. He used the side door, she said. The small one we propped with a rubber wedge, remember? The hinge squeaked. We forgot to oil it all summer. The wedge? He said. Red, she said. Shaped like a strawberry. Stupid thing, I threw it out when the fire happened. He looked at the floor. The side door still existed, narrow, moody, with new paint that couldn't forget the old squeak. Out in the alley, a mural flaked, a dumpster drowsed, a stray cat performed a ritual with a paper bag. He knelt and stared at the threshold where the city had shaved itself thinner 1,000 times. Nothing. The alley kept its oaths. The suspect, the one in the cuffs, the one the city wanted to be the whole story, asked to see a priest. The detective led him. He watched through glass that made everyone look like moral gray. The priest sat and listened and offered the type of silence that means business. The suspect talked about work and the price of oil and an uncle who always cheated at cards. He did not confess. He did not deny with conviction. He moved his hands a lot, like he was rearranging air into an alibi. The detective left them to their choreography and returned to the lab where the diary waited, where the receipt waited, where the line on the receipt waited like a compass that points to something other than north. The latent indentations from the diary bloomed under oblique light. Letters swam. A partial phrase surfaced. It wasn't a name. It wasn't a confession. It was a place. Written with the casual shorthand of locals. Pines Lot. The detective knew it. Every kid knew it. An unofficial overlook at the edge of the old quarry. A place to watch the city pretend to be far away. Lovers parked there. Loners too. From there, the town looked like an open jewelry box. The detective stared at the words as if they might reorganize themselves into mercy. He sent the page to linguistic analysis anyway, because hope requires redundancy. That night he took a drive. No lights. He let the dark make the first move. The road to the Pines lot curled like a thought you didn't want to finish. Pines stood in rank, whispering like congregations do when the sermon goes on too long. In 1998, teenagers sketched their names into the bark like signatures on a fragile treaty. He parked where the gravel knew how to remember tire patterns. He sat with the engine off until the ticking cooled into a metronome. An owl made a comment. The city below had no idea. He stepped out. The lot held its breath. He played his flashlight low, an oblique slice, the way you do when you're asking the ground to confess. You can drink light wrong. He sipped it. There. Old glass glitter. The fossil of a bottle, crushed. There. Cigarette filters like tiny pale bones. There. Fresh scuff where someone had pivoted recently. The dust had a memory of sneakers. 2 sets. 1 athlete, 1 not. He knelt and pressed a finger in the dirt where the scuffs overlapped, like a dance that didn't decide who led. He photographed footprints the way astronomers photograph comets. Humbly, hungrily, knowing the sky erases what it doesn't need. On the guardrail, initials carved deep, J+M, a treaty intact. A newer carving, sloppy, possibly drunk, cold case club. The detective snorted once and let it go. He kept circling. On the far edge, where most people didn't bother because the view ran out, a patch of earth surrendered something small and metallic to the toe of his boot. He crouched, a key blank, not cut. New back in. He squinted. 98, maybe 97, based on the manufacturer's old logo stamped tiny on the bow. A blank doesn't open anything. A blank opens possibilities. He bagged it like a butterfly you don't dare hold. Back in the car, he wrote a line in his notebook. Pines lot, a meeting or lure. He underlined lure twice. He stared at the word until it stared back. He drove home on the slow streets, the ones with 4-way stops that made you negotiate with your neighbors. By morning, the receipt was a celebrity. The lab balanced it like a relic. The straight line held pressure points that belonged to a hand. Length, speed, a tiny hitch near the middle where the pen caught and the arm refused to admit it. People have signatures, so do their gestures. The analyst compared the hitch to samples on file, including the suspects, including 5 cousins, including the father with the solvent-stained hands. Not a match, not none either. A cousin of a cousin, maybe. The surname hum grew louder. The detective mapped the family onto the city like constellations. One star sat too close to the cafe for comfort. He went to see him. Not the suspect. The other quiet. The man of the straight line. A cousin with a job in logistics, which is just another word for orchestrating movement without calling attention to the conductor. His apartment was neat in the way of people who don't like to be found out. Surfaces clear, drawers deceptive. He greeted the detective with a smile that belonged in a brochure. Tea? No. Coffee? No. Water, then. He poured and did not drink. The detective looked at the man's hands. They were calm until they noticed they were being watched. Then they bristled slightly, the way a cat's fur learns weather. We're revisiting an old night, the detective said, taking out nothing, showing nothing, letting the quiet perform. So I've heard, the man said lightly. Big news. Closure for the family. He said closure as if he'd practiced pronouncing it with the correct flavor of empathy. You were around then, the detective said. Not a question. Around, the man echoed. Everyone was around. It was the 90s. We were all young and terrible at making good choices. You knew her? Everyone knew her the way you know the person who stands out without trying, he said, but his eyes flinched, blink right up, pupils varnished with memory. We all did. He folded and refolded a dish towel without noticing. You ever go to the cafe? Once, twice. Coffee was bad. Ambiance was worse. You leave through the side door? What an oddly specific question. Specific night, the detective said. He placed the water on a coaster that read, Don't be a stranger. The ring on the wood from other glasses made a faint constellation. The man's gaze followed it with annoyance, like somebody had messed with a system he controlled. You giving me a polygraph in my kitchen? The man asked, still brochure polite, but the edges were showing. I'm giving you a chance to remember, the detective said, because the city is remembering for you and it's not good at nuance. The man smiled and did not show his teeth. Memory is a liar. So is the present when it suits us. The detective leaned back. Where were you the night she vanished? The man leaned forward. Where were you? Not rhetorical, the detective said. The man shrugged. Home. My roommate would confirm, except he moved to Arizona and reinvented himself as a cactus. People leave. That's how we survive. Pines lot? Lovely view. Popular. I prefer rooftops. Straight lines? The detective asked. Curves bore easily, the man replied, and then laughed at his own joke, and then realized it wasn't one. The detective stood. We'll need a sample. For what? A crack in the brochure. The man's hand touched his own throat, quick, like checking a gate. For elimination, the detective said, bland as oatmeal. Routine. Voluntary helps everyone. Everyone, the man echoed, tasting the word like medicine. He didn't refuse. He didn't accept. He walked the detective to the door with a grace that belonged on a stage. On the threshold, he tilted his head. Solved, right? That's what they're saying. They say lots of things, the detective said. I prefer quiet that tells the truth. He left and noticed the building's side exit was propped with a rubber wedge. Not red, not a strawberry. Gray, practical. The hinge said nothing. The lab called. The diary indentations revealed a second phrase beneath the first. Ghostwriting under ghostwriting. Ask T about note. The detective stared at the words until he could hear their breath. He called Tegan back. The note, he said without hello. Not the one on the fridge, the one that never made the news. Did anyone else leave a note for her? Something that day? Something that didn't sound like her? Tegan pulled at her pencil, her memory unspooling. We found a slip at the cafe, she said slowly. Not a receipt, a slip from the order pad, no order on it, just back soon. Don't wait. We joked it was dramatic. We tossed it. I'm sorry, we were kids. He closed his eyes. The fridge note, the cafe slip, same phrase, same choreography. 2 rooms, 2 magnets, 2 alibis assembled like furniture you bought without reading the instructions. 1 author? 2. The pen style could be learned, the cadence could be copied. But who thought to plant the same line twice, like stakes, one in public, one private, to steer a story toward she left and away from she was taken? The detective returned to the file. He placed the cafe slip, recreated from Tegan's memory, beside the fridge note in its sleeve. He stared at the straightness of both lines. He thought about the receipt with its surgical stripe. He thought about the cousin in logistics who liked to stand behind life and push. He thought about the suspect in cuffs whose timeline wobbled like a fan on an uneven table. He thought about the Pines lot, the scuffs that danced, the key blank that opened nothing and everything. He thought about the surname that hummed and the second shadow on the grainy 1998 tape that most people missed because it was polite. He let the pieces touch without forcing the fit. Outside, the cul-de-sac rehearsed normalcy. Kids pedaled. Dogs rehearsed barks that weren't needed. The porch light persisted because duty is a habit. The detective opened the window and let in the sound of sprinklers hissing like snakes, the city's lullaby. Solved, the anchor said again on somebody's television down the block, the word a hammer. The detective pictured the stamp slamming down on the file. He pictured the ink spreading hairline cracks. He dialed the DA and spoke softly. We have a second quiet, he said. And the first quiet might be convenient, not correct. He read the DA the phrases. He described the line. He asked for patience in a town that had run out of it a decade ago. He asked for a warrant with its own kind of quiet. Narrow, targeted, surgical. We're past theater, he said. We're into surgery. At midnight, when even the sirens slept, he spread copies of the notes, the receipt, the diary rubbings, the Pines lot photographs, and a map of the family across his kitchen table. He drew no conclusions. He drew arrows. He labeled the arrows with verbs, not nouns. Met, watched, waited, lured, crossed out. He wrote on the edge of the map where the paper was brave. 2 authors, 1 script. He stared at the sentence until it stopped being clever and started being a path. And somewhere, not far, a man folded a dish towel into a perfect rectangle, placed it in a drawer where everything aligned, and listened to the refrigerator hum in the key of C. He smoothed an invisible wrinkle from the air. He stood at a window and looked down at a city that loved headlines and loathed footnotes. He turned off his porch light with 2 gentle taps and waited in a darkness he'd rehearsed his whole life. The warrant arrived on paper that smelled faintly of toner and inevitability, narrow, surgical. The kind that slides under a door and makes the hinges confess. The detective signed for it the way you sign for a package you didn't order but have been expecting your whole life. Logistics cousin, apartment, devices, trash, vehicles, side exit. The judge's signature sat there like a heavy coin, and the detective put it in his pocket next to a pen that had learned the habit of underlining. They rolled quiet, no siren fanfare, no tactical theater, just the precise ballet of people who've practiced disaster. The hallway held its breath. The neighbor with slippers and a robe opened her door 2 inches, and the chain made a sound like a violin out of tune. Knock, knock again, announce. And then they were inside, stepping onto tidy floors that resented the grit of their boots. Neutral furniture, a plant that had never been allowed to die, curtains that knew how to be drawn with one hand. The cousin stood in the kitchen with his palms open and a face turned to low volume. You have a warrant, he said, as if reading a weather report. I respect paper. They moved through his systems with gloved hands and poker faces. The detective drifted to the desk, streamlined, no mess, laptop asleep, phone face down, notebook closed like lips that know when to stay shut. The detective opened the notebook first, not because he expected a confession in ink, but because people who worship minimalism still need somewhere to put their excess. Pages of straight lines. Not sentences, not sketches, just lines, edge to edge, pressure changing halfway through as the wrist remembered a wound or the heart remembered a beat. A practice of control masquerading as art. The analyst who would later hold the receipts up to the light would find herself nodding at these pages like meeting an old enemy in a new suit. A drawer offered pens aligned like soldiers, tips all pointing east. Another offered rubber wedges, new in package, 2 gray, 1 red, strawberry-shaped, nostalgia or taxonomy, who could tell? Doorstops, the cousin said lightly, because the silence was about to say it for him. I consult for places with foot traffic. Logistics has a way of inventing alibis on the fly. He smiled too fast. Where were you Tuesday? The detective asked, not because Tuesday mattered yet, but because the rhythm of questions tunes the room. Work, gym, home, adult life in 3 acts, the cousin said. Receipts? I'm trying to go paperless, he said, and the detective watched the muscle jump near his temple when he realized paperless was a risky word in a case built on a line drawn on paper. The text took the laptop and the phone and the small external drive labeled archive in a tidy hand. They checked the trash, coffee grounds, a tin of fish neatly rinsed, a torn envelope from a logistics firm with a logo that hid a compass in its O. In the bathroom cabinet, cotton swabs in a clear jar, a razor whose blade had been replaced last night, a toothbrush whose bristles leaned toward discipline. The detective cataloged things that weren't interesting until they were. The car, a hatchback that advertised rationality, gave up floor mats with vacuum lines too perfect as if they were practicing their own alibis. In the glove compartment, registration, insurance, and old parking stub for a garage near the cafe district dated years after 1998, but the habit hums. On the back seat, a gym bag with a towel folded into a square that a drill sergeant would respect. He lifted the towel and froze. Beneath, a key blank, identical to the one from the Pines lot, manufacturer's tiny logo winking like a rude memory. New, but from a company that had gone out of that line years ago. Old stock, maybe. Locksmith hobby? The detective asked as they bagged it. Preparedness, the cousin said. We all like to feel we can open what needs opening. He smiled again, and this time the smile remembered its teeth. They collected a voluntary cheek swab with a consent form that read like manners at gunpoint. He signed. The Q-tip whispered across his inner cheek. The detective watched his eyes not blink. The cousin's gaze stayed on a point just left of the detective's shoulder, as if someone else were standing there, quieter, older, patient. They left him in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, not to hide anything, just to anchor a version of himself he'd worked hard to maintain. Downstairs, the detective stepped into the light and felt the city's temperature, warm with interest, cool with doubt. Traffic did what traffic does. A bus wheezed and moved on. Life gossips. Death memorizes. The detective checked his phone. The lab had something from the diary. The indentations that spelled Pines Lot had deeper grooves on the P and the L, the force of someone starting and restarting. Hesitation coded into pressure. The cafe slip, reconstructed in memory, shared the same cadence, the same rhythm of hand that writes short phrases like their verdicts. Not proof, not yet, but proximity. Proximity sings in these rooms louder than truth. At the station, the arrested suspect's lawyer filed motions like paper shields. The suspect sat in a chair whose screws had been tightened that morning because people get nervous when the furniture rattles. He'd slept, he'd showered, he'd shaved. He looked like someone who had rehearsed his best self, and the rehearsal showed. The detective entered with the diary photos and the receipt and the Pines Lot prints, not to show yet, but to let the room feel the weight of facts, even if names weren't attached. The suspect watched him with a curiosity that didn't pretend to be polite anymore. You brought props, the suspect said. I brought anchors, the detective said. To drown me? To keep the story from drifting, the detective said, and sat and let the room decide who would speak first. We going to talk about the priest? The suspect asked, a grin that belonged in a bar where the lights are low and the music excuses you. No, the detective said, we're going to talk about Tuesday nights. You sound like a calendar, the suspect said, and the grin wilted, just a little, because he'd wanted to drag the conversation into a theater where he knew the angles. Where did you buy cigarettes in '98? The suspect blinked. Is this a quiz? Corner of Juniper and 8th had a bodega with a bell that sounded like a spoon in a glass. You were there often. People remember. You had a habit. Habits are good. They give time a rhythm. Do you remember who else had that rhythm? I didn't dance, the suspect said. You watched, the detective said. You watched the cafe door at closing. You watched the side exit. You watched the street with the dead lamp. You were present, so present it wounded you. But you weren't alone in the watching. There was another watcher quieter than you, which is saying something given your quiet was your weapon. The suspect's face turned into a wall with a door somewhere in it. The detective knocked on air. You're going to pin a ghost on me, the suspect said. You need me to be the headline. That's fine, I can carry it. But if there's another, you better learn to say plural. The detective looked at his notes and saw the line he'd written the night before. 2 authors, 1 script. He didn't show it. He let the suspect stew in his own forecast. He ended the session early, a tactic that tastes like mercy but isn't. At the lab, the straight-line ritual met its science. Pressure mapping on the receipt's stripe, comparator overlays with the notebook's lines. Statistical talk that wore numbers like armor. The cousin swab hadn't sung yet, the lab still coaxed it into a melody, but the analyst with the calm voice and the sleepless eyes pointed to 3 micro-hitches that appeared in all 3 places. Receipt, notebook, a practice page recovered from a recycle bin the techs had been smart enough to dip before the custodian made Tuesday vanish. It's idiosyncratic, she said, the way a surgeon says benign or malignant, clean or not clean, not unique in the universe, unique enough here. The detective took the 3 images and placed them side by side on the table in the quiet room where you arrange your thoughts into linear perspective. He traced the hitches with a finger and felt nothing, which is the feeling truth often brings. He looked up and saw the DA standing in the doorway with eyebrows that said, hurry, and a posture that said, don't trip over your own shadow. We can't hold him forever on a hum, the DA said. We need a note that sings. The detective nodded. He knew. He also knew the cousin was tidying his life as they spoke. People who curate their homes like galleries can pack a biography into a carry-on 10 minutes' notice. He needed a lever, and levers hide in small places. He returned to the cafe because stories like to loop. He found Tegan counting cups in grief. He asked her about the fire again, the small one that had eaten the wedge and the order pads and certain forms the city had asked about but never retrieved. Where did the smoke start, he asked. Breaker box, she said. Electric gremlins. Everyone said it was our fault for running the espresso and the microwave at the same time. Everyone, he echoed, and she shrugged because everyone is a shield too. Who fixed it, he asked. An electrician, or someone wearing the uniform, she said, eyes narrowing again at her memory like a lens trying to behave. He had a van with magnetic signage. He didn't charge us, said he was community-minded. He changed the wedge for the side door, brought a gray one to replace the red. He didn't have a name I can remember. But he had a way of not staying in the picture, like when you're taking a photo and a person walks through and you don't see them until you look later and wonder who that is. Do you still have the service slip? He asked, hopeful. She looked apologetic. It was cash, off book. We were underwater. We took the gift and said thank you. He looked at the side door and saw a hinge that had learned to behave. He took a swab of old grease anyway, a ritual more than a strategy. The alley watched and said nothing. Back at the station, a patrol officer with a taste for small victories came in waving a printout like a trophy. Parking records, she said, breathless with the glee of paperwork. Garage on 6th kept logs in the late 90s on dot matrix because the owner loved that printer like a child. We got the boxes. 1 entry on the night that matters for a license plate that used to belong to a truck that used to belong to... She paused for effect, earned it, took it. Our logistics cousin. Time in 2112, time out 0047. Cafe closes at 11 o'clock. Electric hum in the detective's bones. The timeline stretched and snapped into a shape that could hold weight. You are a saint, he told the patrol officer, and she blushed the way saints do when they remember their mortal rent is due. He took the printout to the DA, who held it with fingertips like Holy Writ. It's not a confession, she said. It's a presence, he said. We are in love with presence, she said. Jury, maybe. Judge, perhaps. Community. She looked out the window where the station parking lot held its anonymous ballet. They will want the door slammed. He drove to the Pines lot one more time because superstitions are ladders when you're above the ground. Sunset laid itself thin across the quarry like bandage gauze. He stood at the edge where the view ran out and listened for tires. Gravel spoke. Another car. He turned, slow. The cousin stepped out in casual clothes that tried too hard to apologize for how formal his bones were. No smile now, no brochure face, just a man and his systems. You make a habit of meeting your problems in pretty places, the cousin said. I make a habit of letting the landscape tell me who's lying, the detective said. You think I wrote the notes, the cousin said. You think I drew the line. You think I orchestrated the exit, the wedge, the hinge, the fire, the town's sequence of gasps. You think I like control like other people like sugar. He walked to the guardrail and set his hands on it as if asking it to hold his version of events. I think you wrote a script, the detective said, joining him, two men watching a city they both pretended to own from different angles. I think someone else played a role they weren't smart enough to understand. I think you have a drawer full of straight lines and a head full of rehearsal. I think you crossed out a life and called it efficiency. I think you planned for the second shadow to be invisible because you know how cameras look, but not how the night listens. The cousin's jaw ticked. He didn't look away. Solved, he said finally, spitting the word like a seed. They like that word. It tucks them in. It puts their children to bed. Do you plan to take that from them? I plan to give them something better, the detective said. Truth that doesn't need a stamp. Truth is a luxury item, the cousin said. This town shop's discount. The wind moved. The pines whispered. Down below, a dog barked at a distant nothing. The cousin lifted his hands from the rail and dusted them as if they'd touched ash. He looked at the detective with a kind of weary admiration that felt like a trap. You're going to find only the edges, he said. No center. I have engineered my life to be perimeter. The man in cuffs, he is a center. People love centers. They can point at them. You engineered, the detective said, hearing the verb ring the way a tuning fork does. Logistics, the cousin said. It's a talent. We move things. We place them. We make sure nobody sees the wires. He smiled again. It didn't reach anything that mattered. He turned and walked to his car. He didn't hurry. He didn't look back. He left a tire pattern the gravel would hold until morning. That night, the lab called with music. The cheek swab sang harmony with a partial from the old smear on the linoleum, the one archive swab that had hidden under an index card for a decade because an intern had misfiled it and then left for grad school and the file learned to forgive. Not a full song, a chorus. Familial, like before, but closer now, a harmony that vibrated the glass on the analyst's desk. It narrows the tree to 3, she said, and sent the probabilities like a weather report for one neighborhood only. 3 branches, the suspect in cuffs, the cousin with the lines, a third man who hadn't been on their radar because he lived soft in a different quadrant of the city, like a cat that knows which windows are warm. A brother who wasn't a brother, a step stitched in later, paperwork that had behaved, a name changed by marriage and then changed back for professional reasons. He owned a van. He fixed things for cash. He liked to call himself community-minded. He had once replaced a wedge. The detective wrote the name. He underlined it once, then didn't. He looked at the map of faces and watched a star blink on where he hadn't expected sky. He didn't cheer. He didn't sigh. He gathered his people and he gathered his paper and he watched the city sleep in shifts. Dawn would come with questions. He had a hinge to test. He had a door to knock. He had a straight line to follow from edge to edge until it finally, at last, hit something that refused to be crossed out. The door he chose for the knock sat in a neighborhood that pretended to yawn instead of stare. Morning wore a soft shirt. Lawns blinked dew. Wind chimes rehearsed optimism. The van waited in the drive like a patient animal, white with magnetic signage that could come off in a second if the day turned difficult. The logo curled into friendliness. Community-minded. Fixes fast. Numbers that hummed like a lullaby. The detective stood under the eaves and listened. Houses talk. This one talked in hums. Refrigerator, aquarium, a TV someone forgot to mute, a small air purifier working too hard. He knocked once with knuckles, once with the badge on the air. The man opened with a practiced smile, the kind that knows it will be asked to stay. Mid-40s, forearms freckled by honest work, a tan line at the wrist where a watch had chosen another life, eyes calm, not blank, calm like seas that swallow. Officer, he said, correcting himself when the badge's glare got clearer. Detective, what broke? A joke. Warm, useful either way. Maybe nothing, the detective said, maybe something a long time coming. He kept his voice neighborly because some doors open for that tone and no other. You got a minute? Always for the city, the man said, stepping aside. The living room surrendered itself. Couch domesticated by throws, a coffee table that had learned to avoid clutter, shelves where tools posed like trophies, vintage voltmeter, oiled pliers, a brass clamp that looked like a hand frozen in thought. On the wall, a framed $1 bill from a job that probably didn't include taxes. The aquarium burbled. Neon tetras flashed like cheap fireworks. A child's drawing on the fridge held magnets in a row. Smile, sun, a rectangle van with a crooked rainbow tail. Nice rig, the detective said, nodding toward the driveway. She's steady, the man said. You know how it is. Efficiency beats speed. He poured water into 2 glasses and pushed one across. The detective watched the surface and read the tremor of the hand that tilted the pitcher. None. The man had practiced life until it didn't spill. We're revisiting some old service calls, the detective said, casual. Back when the cafe on Foothill had that breaker issue. The man's smile did the smallest math. That place was a cough in a cup, he said, friendly, almost fond. I was there once, maybe twice. People panicked after the fire. I tightened a hinge, swapped a wedge, replaced a cracked plate on an outlet because the code was a rumor in that building. I don't write everything down when it's cash, helps me be affordable. You remember a night in '98, the detective said. Late summer, side door squeak. You bring a wedge, gray, to replace a red strawberry one. The strawberry, he said, a laugh like gravel. Looked like a toy. People treat doors like pets. I treat them like exits. Yeah, I replaced it. Why free? The detective asked. He lifted a shoulder. It was a good gesture. Good gestures recruit future business. You surfers call it catching the next wave. I don't surf, the detective said. Then you must be the wave, the man said, amused by his own line, or maybe measuring how jokes landed in here. He took a sip of water. The tetras flickered like busy thoughts. You keep spare wedges, the detective said. The cousin keeps spare wedges. Family runs in grooves. The man's eyes flicked barely. Then, a shrug without shoulders. He's organized to a fault, he said lightly. Logistics turns people into rulers and grids. I fix things that break when grids meet gravity. Another sip. He got himself in a knot. We're asking the city to unlearn some old conclusions, the detective said. Your cousin keeps straight-line notebooks. You keep hinges honest. Between the two of you, doors open when you want, and close when you say. I prefer open, he said, which is what people say when they mean I like control. The detective let the room breathe. He looked at the aquarium, at a plastic castle where a fish napped like a child that doesn't trust silence. We're also revisiting the Pines lot. You mean the overlook where the teenagers encrypt their names in bark? He smiled again, and the smile flinched at the edges. I've popped a trunk lock there for a kid who lost her keys. You get calls at all hours when your number lives on magnets. Key blanks, the detective said, choosing the word like a key he knew fit. You keep a stash? Sure, the man said, moving toward the garage door because he understood choreography. Neighbors panic, locks panic. I calm them down. He opened the interior door and let the garage's sacrament reveal itself. Order, pegboards like syllabi, jars of screws labeled in neat caps, wood, sheet metal, mystery. A rack of keys lined like silver teeth, some cut, some blank, some stamped with logos that had aged out of catalogs years ago. The detective let a finger hover near the manufacturer bow he knew too well. It winked back like recognition at a funeral. You mind if we photograph? The detective asked. Warrant? The man asked, but it was a habit, not a demand. Papers on the way, the detective said, which was true in the same way a storm is always coming. Voluntary makes you a friend. Community-minded, the man repeated, amused at his own tagline. Frame away. A tech took quick pictures, oblique angles to coax serials and tiny logos into willingness. The detective watched the man, watched the tech. No flinch, no twitch, just a mind eating the room and making lists. On a shelf, doorstops in packs, gray, black, and the punchline, one red strawberry, dusty, retired. He picked it up. The man grinned. Mascot, he said, from another life. From our life, the detective said, and bagged the dust from its edges like an apology he'd delivered to the lab later. Can we talk about why? The man said suddenly, the smile getting bored, the eyes staying calm. You're here with voices from '98? The radio says you got your man. The community thinks they can exhale without getting lightheaded. Are you in the business of taking air away? I'm in the business of weather reports, the detective said. I don't make clouds. I tell people where to stand. He studied the workbench. A ledger lay open. Dates in one column, addresses in another, checks and cash in a third. No cafe listed for '98, not proof, not clean. The ledger had begun in 2001, a neat narrative choice. The man had edited his own life with a ruler. Do you remember her? The detective asked, and the sentence was glass. A little, more after the headlines. He leaned on the bench like he belonged there. She was the kind of person you notice because she isn't trying to be the kind of person you notice. That type gets into the city's soft parts. You see her that night? In the cafe, perhaps leaving, perhaps not. The brain photographs differently when it expects a flash. His tone insisted on nuance. The detective wrote the word liar next to the word nuance in a notebook only he would see. We'll need a sample, the detective said. For what? Elimination, he said. Same oatmeal tone, same ceremony. The man's jaw thought about refusing. Then it didn't. He swabbed like a citizen, like someone used to being the solution to small things and therefore confident he couldn't be suspected of large ones. The Q-tip drank and went into its plastic coffin. The tech labeled it with a neatness that could survive trial. The detective left with pictures, dust, a ledger that said 2001 is where memory begins, a name that now lived underlined in his pocket. a cordial nod from a man who had turned ordinary into armor. He drove slow. The radio rehearsed the city's relief like a chorus determined to be catchy. He turned it off and let the engine's low vowels fill the cabin. At the station, the cousin with the straight lines had signed his consent and gone to work. The suspect in cuffs counted ceiling tiles and tried to turn the number into a spell. The DA read the dot matrix parking record again and again until the holes on the side told their own story in Braille. The detective walked into the lab with the strawberry wedge and the brass clamp and the dust from a doorstop's past. "We're building a bridge of small things," he told the analyst. "I don't need it to carry a tank. I just need it to carry 12 minds across." The analyst, steady voice, sleepless eyes, set the strawberry under a microscope and smiled with the grim joy of a person who finally meets the riddle they've been promised. "Dust is biography," she said, "and rubber remembers." She tested for oils, for pocket grit, for the ghost of a hand that once pressed it into a threshold. She found a combination of hydrocarbon residues that matched the grease from an outlet plate that had been replaced at the cafe after the fire. "Same toolkit," she said, "same day or same habit. Not a DNA signature, an occupational one." "Occupational signature," the detective repeated, tucking the phrase into a headline slot in his skull. "We can teach a jury to love that." The diary indentations were still singing. Another ghost sentence bled forward when they shifted the light. "Pines, lot 10 or 11?" The question mark, pressed hard, punctured the page below. She had been uncertain about the hour, but sure about the place. Someone had answered for her with a note that said, "Don't wait." 2 scripts, same production date. He took the lab news to the DA's office, where Sunlight tried to reason with case files. "You going to charge the cousin?" she asked, tapping the parking log. "Not yet," he said. "I need him in orbit. I need to watch his gravity. He leads me to the van. The van leads me to the wedge. The wedge leads me to a man who likes to be owed favors." "He likes to fix things," she said. "He likes to decide what fixed means," the detective said. They drafted a second narrow paper, a surgical request for any work the van man had done in '98 around Foothill and the cul-de-sac with the dead lamp. Neighbors, friends, unaffiliated. They asked for phone logs from a carrier that had died before smartphones learned to play God, the kind of company that kept boxes because no one had the heart to throw them away. They sent a patrol to sweet-talk a widow who'd run a nail salon by the cafe. She kept appointment books like diaries and didn't mind showing love in ink. The widow delivered, an August Page, a name the detective recognized from the cul-de-sac, an 8:30 p.m. set of initials in pencil, then crossed out and moved to 9:15 because electrician running late had been written in the margin. The electrician's first name matched the van man's. The detective felt the floor tilt toward him like a stage that finally surrendered its trick. He knocked on the widow's door himself. She wore memory like perfume. He was handsome in a repairman way, she said, flipping pages for him as if auditioning for assistant historian. Smelled like clean pennies and pine cleaner. He was kind. He fixed the buzzing light in my back room because I said it made the customers jittery. I paid cash. He didn't want the receipt. He had a magnet card. I kept it. I keep everything. She brought out a shoebox of ancient minutia, the city's shadow archives, and there it was, the magnet for the van, the logo with the hidden O, the phone number whose area code had aged. When he peeled the magnet off its backing, dust lifted like a sigh. "Did he talk about the cafe?" the detective asked. "He asked whether they had finally fixed the side door," she said. I asked why he cared. He said because a door that doesn't understand its job is a liability. "Liability," he repeated. "Because in certain mouths the word means target." He left the salon with proof that the van man and the cafe had a calendar that once overlapped. He returned to the station and drew a timeline with a Sharpie on plexiglass. Cafe closing, cousin's truck in the garage, van man near Foothill late, the wedge swap, the breaker fix, the fire weeks later that ate certain papers and left others photogenic, the Pines lot question mark, the fridge note, the cafe slip, the same 4 words like a stamp someone kept re-inking. The swab came back at dusk, dressed in caveats and powered by math. The smear on the linoleum liked the van man's harmonics, closer than cousin, more in tune than the suspect, but still a chorus, not a solo. Familial but nearer the center, like a candle ring. The analyst drew a tree and circled the branch that held both cousin and van man, and the way their leaves touched in wind. "Within 2, likely 1, she said. "Your coin is about to flip." The detective didn't flip coins. He checked pockets. He drove to the van man's again, but not to knock. He parked down the block where a jacaranda shed purple glory on a curb that couldn't get over itself. He watched the house do its evening pantomime, lights shift, TV glow, a figure lengthening in the kitchen like a sundial. An hour passed. A second car arrived, familiar in its humility. The cousin slipped through the side gate the way water chooses the crack. Family conference. He made a call he let ring once, then hung up, the kind that tells the person on the other end, it's time. The detective dialed a number of his own. 2 unmarked slid into the block like quiet thoughts. The detective walked up the sidewalk like a man checking if his laces are tied. He knocked. The cousin opened faster than a thoughtful person would. The van man appeared behind him. No smile now, hands visible, which is what people do when they want to prove they aren't holding knives in the visible places. We need conversation, the detective said. We need warrants, the cousin said. We have them, the detective said. We also have a widow who keeps magnets, a salon that remembers Buzz, a ledger that starts at an era convenient to innocence, a wedge that tells its own chemical story, a key blank that wants to grow up, and a parking log that sings. Songs can be misheard, the van man said softly. So can silence, the detective returned, stepping into the living room where the aquarium kept time. The Tetras did not vote. He laid photos on the coffee table, one after another, a paper parade, receipt with the line, notebook lines with an identical hitch, hinge grease under the microscope, wedge, magnet, nail salon page, the van's logo, the Pines Lot scuffs, the key blank twins. He let the cousins stand in the shared air above these artifacts as if they were reading their own eulogies from cue cards. You like control, the detective said to the cousin. You draft scripts, you set props, you make exits true. He turned to the van man. You like to be needed. You fix light that buzzes and doors that forget their job. You earn trust, cheap and fast. It makes you invisible, which is its own hungry high. Is there a question? The cousin asked. There will be, the detective said. He pointed to the fridge note and the reconstructed cafe slip. Who wrote these? Everyone, the cousin said, and then caught himself, and the word hung in the room like a cheap chandelier. The van man's eyes flicked to the aquarium, to the castle, to the tiny dark gap under the plastic arch where a fish could pretend to be safe. He looked tired suddenly, older than the male had been telling him he was. It doesn't bring anyone back, he said. Nothing does, the detective said. But turning off the wrong porch light helps the street sleep. The cousin made a sound like a laugh edited by a blade. You think this town wants nuance? They want a trophy on their mantle that says solved. They don't want to read the footnote where the equation has 2 variables. Then we'll teach them math, the detective said. He nodded toward the door. 2 officers waited like punctuation marks. Separate cars, separate rooms. We'll try your stories on and see which one tears at the seams. The van man didn't argue. He washed his hands, a ritual or a confession or both, dried them carefully, and let the cuffs write circles on his skin. The cousin rolled his eyes at the spectacle and then did not resist. The aquarium burbled. The detective turned it off on his way out because some things don't deserve to keep rehearsing calm in front of an empty house. At the station, the rooms were ready. Lights, cameras, a clock that could be trusted. The cousin watched the lens like it was a colleague. The van man watched the table like it was a patient. The detective chose the van man first, not because he'd break easier, but because his silence had a tiredness in it that suggested it wanted to be useful. We're past theater, the detective said, keeping his vow. Were you at the cafe the night she disappeared? I was, the man said. No flinch, no dramatic arc, a fact placed gently on the table like a wrench that had done its work. I fixed the hinge in the afternoon, tested the wedge, told the manager to oil the squeak and stop propping the door at closing because it invites trouble. I came back late because the manager called and said the breaker was buzzing again. It wasn't. He was nervous because of the men watching. I sat a while. I left. I drove the long way. I went to the overlook after to breathe. The city is loud. The pines are not. Did you write the note? Yes, he said, and the words slid across the table like ice. The one at the cafe. She was on the phone at the counter, told someone she'd be back. She laughed. She couldn't find a pen. I tore a slip and wrote what she said. Back soon. Don't wait. I didn't think I was co-authoring a crime. I thought I was making someone's life 5 seconds easier. The fridge note? He shook his head. Not mine. Whose? He looked at the camera like it could absolve him. He writes practice lines, he said, nodding toward the wall where he knew the cousin breathed. He could write anything straight. Did you see her leave? I saw the side door open. I saw a pickup idling. I saw the cousin in the corner once, earlier, facing the room like a reflection that stalks you. He left before I did. I saw the other man, the one you cuffed first, watched the door like it was going to confess to him. I saw too much and understood too little. Pines Lot? The detective asked. I went, he said. I do sometimes. It's where you put a day down. I saw 2 sets of prints later when I went back because guilt is a lousy curator, and I went back to see if I had failed at something I didn't know I was responsible for. I found a key blank because I keep them and I lose them, and the world returns them to me like the punchline to a joke nobody else likes. I didn't hurt her. I fixed things. I fixed things. His voice wavered once and then found its level. If I'd known I was in a scene, I would have yelled, "Cut!" The detective let the room hold that. He stepped out and walked down the hall where the cousin waited for his turn in the theater he pretended to despise. He looked back at the van man through the glass, forearms browned by work, hands quiet now, a face that had finally admitted the present and wanted to know what to do with it. He thought of the porch light on the cul-de-sac, the stubborn gold rectangle, the way it refused to learn bedtime. He thought of the word solved and how the city had held it like a balloon. Solved, he whispered to the hallway, to the doors, to the mirror. Not yet. Then he opened the next door and went in, pen ready, straight line willing, asking the cousin to draw the one he couldn't cross without cutting himself. He sat across from the cousin and let the fluorescent hum tune the room into something like truth. The cousin's posture was an advertisement for posture, shoulders square, spine a scribe's rule, chin leveled to suggest cooperation without surrender. The camera blinked its red dot, steady as a heartbeat. The detective set his pen down and did not touch it. He wanted the cousin to ask about the pen. He wanted him to feel the itch of the straight line that wasn't his. "You selected this chair," the detective said, conversational as if they were squinting at a menu. "Most people pick the one by the door." "I prefer symmetry," the cousin said. "It helps me think." "What does asymmetry do to you?" "Reminds me that chaos is a hobby for people who can afford it." The cousin's smile worked like a clasp. "You've arranged your papers to suggest momentum. That implies you believe in endings." "I believe in gravity," the detective said. "Everything falls somewhere." He slid a photo of the receipt with the surgical stripe halfway across the table. It stopped between them, a white flag that meant nothing of the sort. "Do you remember drawing this line?" "I draw a lot of lines," the cousin said. He kept his hands folded loosely, like a man whose impulses were domesticated long ago. "We live by them. We die by them. Roads, ledgers, boundaries, the ones you enforce with a badge, the ones I enforce with schedules." "You practiced," the detective said, placing the notebook image beside the receipt. "Hitches aligned like fingerprints that refuse to be called fingerprints. This is the rhythm of a hand that likes to rehearse control." "Control is a public service," the cousin said. "You of all people should have 'yes' stamped on your bones." "Did you write the fridge note?" the detective asked, the question a needle that knew exactly where to pierce. "I could have," the cousin said, a surgeon's honesty. "Precise, slippery. It is within my capability to imitate neatness, but capability and action are estranged cousins. Estranged cousins still show up to funerals," the detective said. "You were at the cafe that night." "Parking records are quaint," he said. "The garage owner's dot matrix is an antique, but yes, I was there. The coffee offended me. The ambiance was needy. I left." "You left before or after you stared at her?" The cousin's face stayed brochure smooth, only a tiny vein in his temple confessed to circulation. "She was a person who created a wake. People notice wakes. I don't swim in them." "Tegan remembers you at the corner table," the detective said, "back to the window, the room arranging itself around your quiet." "Tegan remembers a performance," he said evenly. "She's generous like that." "You wrote a straight line on a receipt and called it nothing," the detective said. "And then a straight line appeared on a slip that told a life to wait for itself." "The van man wrote your slip," he said, casual as an elbow on a bar. He confessed, not very sporting of him, but I suppose confessing to pens is cheaper than confessing to knives. "The fridge note," the detective said again, almost gentle. "It isn't his hand. It isn't hers. It's a hand trained to behave. Yours." The cousin glanced at the lens. The lens recorded the glance. He breathed once, a measured intake that sounded like an old elevator choosing a floor. "You are very tired," he said to the detective, not unkind. "You have carried the city's breath in your hands for years. You want to give it back to them, filtered, fresh. You want a sentence that ends." "I want a true sentence," the detective said, and slid a third image across, the diary indentations, ghost letters shimmering under oblique light. "Pines Lot 10 or 11. She wrote uncertainty. Someone answered for her. Back soon. Don't wait. Twice. 2 rooms. 1 author. You." "I prefer to think of myself as an editor," the cousin said. The detective let that word sit. Editor. The small god who cuts, rearranges, decides what the audience sees and what they never will. He could feel the cousin relax with his own metaphor, stepping into a role that fit better than suspect. "Walk me through your edit," the detective said, voice soft enough to lure, hard enough to hold. "I saw a sequence without choreography," the cousin said, almost pleased. "No stage manager, people bumping into furnaces, into thresholds, into each other. A hinge that squealed a warning every time it moved, a pickup idling like a metronome, a young woman-length silence about to be swallowed by gossip and incompetence. I introduced order. I told the world what it wanted to hear so it would stop making noise." "You staged an exit," the detective said. "I staged an explanation," he corrected. "Suburbia gets rashes when it can't explain itself." The phrase was hers. I borrowed it. It fit. "Back soon. Don't wait. We are always saying that, even when we mean the opposite." "Why?" the detective asked. Why bother? Why take on authorship of a problem that didn't require your signature?" The cousin tilted his head, and for a second the charm peeled back and a leaner thing looked out. "Because it did require my signature," he said quietly. "Chaos asked for a manager, and because the city loves a single point of failure, and I dislike living in cities that depend on one thread." "Threads snap," the detective said. "People do too." "People are elastic," he said, "until they aren't. Your suspect is elastic until he isn't. The van man is elastic until he isn't. I am elastic where it matters and metal where it counts." "You saw her leave," the detective said, "through the side door." "I saw a door open and a story enter it," the cousin said. "I saw watchers pretending not to watch. I saw a clock that wanted to be a compass." "You followed her," the detective said. "I followed the principle," the cousin said. "Principles travel better than people." "Did you go to the Pines lot?" the detective asked. "Everyone went to the Pines lot," he said, smiling. "It was the 90s. That's what the youth did with their fear. Elevated it, looked down on it, named it a view. I went the week after, alone, to watch the city audition its guilt. I stood where you like to stand. I practiced not breathing. You'd be impressed." The detective leaned in. "You planted the key blank." "I am not sentimental," the cousin said. "Trophies are for the undecided." "Did you know the van man wrote the cafe slip?" the detective asked. "I know who writes in block letters and who writes in loops," he said. "I know who carries quarters and who talks to their shoes. I know who oils hinges. I know who doesn't. I know the van man likes to function. He is a man who sees himself as a salve. He was present for the scene without understanding the script. That is his failing." "Your failing?" the detective asked. "Believing an edit could save a city," he said. And for the first time, something like fatigue tapped the corner of his mouth. The detective let the air grow heavier. Then he cracked it. "Where is she?" The cousin blinked. The room rushed to each eyelid like waves trying to decide which shore to choose. "Solved," he said, and tilted the word until its letters sloshed. "That is your job. You carry that water, detective. I manage flow. I don't dig wells." The detective stood. "You're charged," he said, calm, concrete. "For obstruction, for tampering, for the notes, for the wedge that changed the door's behavior in the hours that mattered, for the receipt game you played like a child with a match." "You'll overcharge," the cousin said. "You'll frighten me on paper. You'll allow the city to taste thunder. I will be bail. I will be breakfast at my own table by Sunday." "Maybe," the detective said, "but Sunday will feel different. The city will have read your footnote." He stepped out, left the cousin in the light that didn't love him. In the next room, the van man sat with his hands on his knees as if waiting to be told where to put them next. The detective leaned in the doorway, let the lab's windows glow in his peripheral. "He calls you a salve," the detective said. "People like ointments," the van man said wearily. "Easy to apply. Promises on the label." "Did you fix the side door to make it safer?" the detective asked. "Or to make it obedient?" "Doors obey rules," the man said. "The rule is simple. In an emergency, open. In a quiet, stay shut. Humans ask too much of thresholds." "After the fire, you swapped the wedge," the detective said. "Earlier, you had swapped one for gray." "I did," the man said. "I was proud of that. The strawberry was a joke, pretending to be a tool. I prefer tools that don't require applause." "Did you let the side door rest against the wedge that night?" the detective asked. "I told them not to," he said. "Propped doors are invitations. I said it like a mantra. I doubt anyone listened." The detective set the magnet from the salon on the table. "You met the owner that night, too." "I did," he said, buzzing light, a woman with a calendar that ruled her like a monarchy. "I like people who keep books." "You're swab," the detective said, and felt his own pulse like a metronome in his wrist. Likes the smear on the kitchen floor. Not a match, but a family hymn. You are the branch the wind touches. The man gave him a look that had no theatrics in it at all. I live with family even when I live alone, he said. I share knives, I share jokes, I share holidays where people leave angry and return with gifts. I share a name that belongs on a tree that needs pruning. He laid his palm flat on the table. I did not touch her. I touched the door. I touched the wedge. I touched the town. The detective left him with water and a blank wall. In the corridor, the DA waited with a mood that smelled like rain. We could charge both and let discovery thrash, she said. We could take obstruction and tampering now, keep the murder in our pocket until the lab's next song. She studied the detective's face. But you want the center, not the edges. I want the body to speak, he said, and the word body snagged on something in the hallway's air and refused to glide. He realized the cruel fact he'd been working around like a piece of furniture no one could move. The absence had never been allowed to turn into a place. No grave. No footprint that held the whole weight of the missing. No center of gravity. He went back to the cul-de-sac, alone, while lawyers wrote and phones lit up with journalists learning their next set of verbs. He parked under the dead street lamp that now shone, finally replaced by the city's late budget and earlier embarrassment. Porch lights glowed up and down the block, a picket fence of small suns. He stood at the mailbox and remembered the way flyers had molted staples onto bark. He walked up the path and stared at the frame of the front door. There, the faint indent beneath the knob where a rubber wedge could hold a door against its impulse to close. Not dramatic, not damning, just the jawline of a habit. He stepped inside with the family's permission he never assumed and never abused, and toured the choreography of the night, mug on the coaster, kettle that had preached its last sermon at 11. He crouched on the linoleum where the smear had been taken, where a swab had learned to sing. He put his hand 6 inches above the tile and felt nothing because that's what tile gives you, indifference and reflection. He turned to the fridge, to the magnet shaped like the Golden Gate, to the blank square where the paper once lived. He imagined the straightness of the line. He imagined the pen refusing to wander. He opened the fridge. Cold light. Milk with a date that had arrived and departed 30 times. Ketchup like a stubborn stain. A small jar of capers nobody in the family liked, but nobody had thrown away because grief teaches you that throwing away is a spell with side effects. He closed the door gently and listened to the gasket kiss the frame. Tight. Good seal. A door doing its job. He checked the back door. The threshold had a scratch. Old but angrier than the others. He followed it to the step, to a rectangle of dirt pressed flat. A planter had stood there once, heavy. He asked the father, and the father nodded. We moved it after, he said. It felt wrong. It had died. We used to prop the door on it when the house got hot before we fixed the fan, his voice cracked. Before everything. The detective measured from the door to the scratch to the step, wrote the numbers in his small square hand. He imagined a wedge. He imagined a door. He imagined a body moving through an exit that thought it had a vote. He pictured a person holding the door open with a planter, a hand, a foot, an idea. He pictured someone's neatness editing the world into compliance. Late, back at the station, he spread the new notes across the plexiglass timeline. He added a line, door trained to disobey. He added a second, 2 hands trained to teach it. He rubbed his eyes and the world smeared. He blinked until the world agreed to be specific again. The lab called, soft voice for late hours. We tested residue from that strawberry wedge dust, the analyst said. Grease matched to cafe outlet plate is strong. And the dust itself, oak pollen, trace pine pitch, microsilica like quarry dust. Your mascot has been to the pines. He stared at the phone like it had pulled a coin from behind his ear. The wedge went to the lot, he said. Or the lot came to the wedge, she murmured. Either way, your props travel. He drove, because thinking demanded movement, to the van man's garage again, paper in pocket, courtesy in voice, and asked for the box where he kept the things he retired. The man watched him, with the expression of a plumber watching a flood. He pointed to a top shelf. The detective climbed the small ladder and brought down a plastic tote labeled junk in a hand that had forced the word to be tidy. Inside, door hardware past its prime, the red strawberry, gray wedges chewed by thresholds, a hinge that had learned to complain in 3 languages, a brass plate the size of a wallet. He lifted the plate, held it at angle. The edge shone where a file had kissed it. He turned it. On the back, written in pencil, preserved by dust. Foothill. Back room. He bagged it. He bagged the strawberries dust again, greedier. He bagged a gray wedge with a pine needle embedded like a fossilized sneeze. He signed every bag like a vow. On the way out, he faced the van man. Why the lot? He asked. He yelled. I go there, the man said simply. I fix, I breathe. Maybe I took the wedge once thinking I'd sand it, clean it, return it, and forgot. I have 2 hands, detective, but they are not always enough to prevent my life from being a pile. Your cousin? The detective asked. He doesn't breathe, the man said. He schedules oxygen. The cousin, in his room, asked for water and got silence instead. The suspect in cuffs slept because some people are blessed with sleep even when the world is screaming. The detective entered the cousin's room again and didn't sit. We found your practice lines in your recycle, he said. We found wedge dust at the Pines. We found a plate with Foothill written on it in a place it should have left years ago. We found your presence in a garage that tried to be a church. You found my culture, the cousin said, not my crime. We found choreography, the detective said, and a missing lead dancer. He took a breath and spent it carefully. Here's my offer, he said. You don't get out by Sunday if you keep guarding your script. You go nowhere fast. You watch the city learn to hate your kind of neatness. Or you give me the center, not the edge, not your edits, the original scene, where he took her, where you watched him take her, where you corrected the lighting, fixed the hinge, moved the wedge, wrote the note, steered the story. Where she lies now, or where she was last whole, you give me that, and I will write your name smaller in the headline. You give me a place, and I give this family a verb stronger than hope. The cousin studied him as if grading a paper. For a long minute, the only motion in the room was the red dot blinking and the detective's pulse visible in his throat, traitor and friend. Then the cousin exhaled through his nose, an accountant erasing a column. You think there's a place, he said. But there isn't a place. There's a system. There's a grid. There's movement. We engineered disappearance to be a circuit, not a point. We, the detective said softly. We, the cousin said, and the room got colder, and the camera blinked like a lighthouse that finally saw the reef it had been warning about all these years. You want a center, the cousin continued, because our species needs alters. There is no alter, there is a loop. The detective leaned forward, not to intimidate, not to loom, just to bring his face into the field where lies got shy. Draw me the loop, he said. And the cousin smiled for real for the first time, showing a flash of the boy who learned to enjoy being the smartest person in a room without furniture. Oh, detective, he said, you already drove it. Outside, the city turned over in its sleep. The porch light at the cul-de-sac burned. The pines whispered. Somewhere a wedge held a door's jaw open to a memory, and the night, practiced, kept its lines straight from edge to edge. He said I'd already driven it, and the sentence sat in the room like a compass nobody trusted until the needle began to twitch. A loop, not a point, not a shrine, a route that fed on habit the way fires feed on air. The cousin looked pleased the way architects do when someone finally notices the staircase that had been hiding in plain sight. The red dot blinked. The detective didn't smile back. You choreographed a circle, the detective said, voice steady as a metronome no one could see. Tell me its beats. The cousin steepled fingers like a cathedral made of bones. You think singularly, he said. A before and an after. We lived in intervals. Tuesday rules the bins. Friday rules the plant. Sunday sleeps while everything dirty pretends to be holy. We borrowed the city's own pulse and set our watch by it. He tapped the table once. Door, alley, service lane, transfer, overlook, water, return. Return to what? The detective asked. To zero, the cousin said, almost fondly. Loops love zero. He gave no map, not in nouns, not in mileage, but the verbs he'd already scattered began to braid themselves into direction. The detective left him to his posture and walked the corridor that smelled faintly of coffee, turned into decisions. He found a whiteboard that still wore an old briefing and erased it with his sleeve, uncaring that the marker bled onto cloth. He drew a circle in black and wrote the city's habits around it. Cafe 2300, back door, side alley, garage 21, 12 to 047, Pines, transfer station, Wednesdays, water plant, backwash, O2 Hoku, cul-de-sac, fanfix, salon, buzzfix. The board looked like fate pretending to be math. He drove at dusk because the city speaks truer when the light is indecisive. The cafe district exhaled steam and nostalgia. He rolled through the alley where the wall murals shed color like sunburn, parked where a van could tuck its conscience, and followed the alley's mouth to the service lane that stitched behind 3 blocks of businesses like a private spine. Dumpsters in formation, grease halos where restaurants had repented, a storm grate with teeth. He knelt and let his light skim the metal. Scratches, parallel, regular. A groove the width of a dolly wheel that had decided the shortest path between 2 points was a secret. He measured with his eye, then with a cheap tape that had saved more cases than anybody's swagger. 30 inches from wall, a line scored in concrete that meant someone had practiced the route enough times to leave a signature. The cousin would call it culture, the detective called it confession. A block over, the municipal garage squatted like a bored elephant, dot matrix heart still beating behind the window where a clerk who loved paper more than people guarded his boxes like a dragon. The detective flashed the warrant and a smile with no teeth. Route logs, he said. Mid-90s through early 2000s. Transfer station runs. You still got them? The clerk, Esquivel stitched above a pocket that smelled faintly of carb cleaner, lit up like an old machine that finally gets power. Nobody asks for the good stuff, he said. They come for parking tickets and cry. You came for the gospel. He led the detective into a back room where the city's memory lived in bankers' boxes, dot matrix sheets banded with green stripes, sprocket holes still whispering, dates stamped with the self-importance of a bureaucracy that never expected to be useful after its own payday. The detective breathed in toner and time. Here, Esquivel said, patting a box labeled Transfer 9899 in black Sharpie that had bled through like ambition. Routes 14B, 17, 3N, Wednesday recycling, Friday roll-offs, Saturday overflow if the Dodgers lost and everyone ordered in. He winked. You'd be surprised what patterns fandom gives a city. He wasn't. He flipped sheets. He found columns that pretended to be dull. He found handwritten fixes where drivers had made reality sit straight. He found, on the Wednesday after the night, an annotation in a hand that liked to press hard. Gate mouth, backwash delay, Lt.Joe. He circled it. He asked for the water plant logs with the same voice. Esquivel grinned like a magician, revealing that the rabbit had a rabbit. We store copies, he said. The plant doesn't trust itself. He produced a binder that could bruise. The detective skimmed. He stopped. He read, backwash cycle extended due to debris. Intake screen cleared. He read the time, 02:11. He drew a small arrows on his palm because paper felt too ceremonial for the moment. Could be anything, Esquivel said, not because he believed it, but because he worried about the world you inherit when it's not. Anything is a long list, the detective said. We've been slowly crossing things off. He left with copies in a folder that seemed heavier than the originals, as if facts gain weight when they leave the rooms where they were born. He pointed the car toward the transfer station, a kingdom of sordid sorrow on the edge of town where trucks exhaled, birds congregated like critics, and men in fluorescent vests moved the city's regret from one pile to another without commentary. He knew the manager, everyone did. She wore ear protection as personality and loved her scale house like some people love dogs. Night shift back then? He asked, leaning into the window where a fan stapled the air into strips. Skeleton crew, she said. Wednesday has its own weather. Backwash night at the plant means we don't push too hard or else the screen throws a tantrum. Anything odd that week in 98? He asked. You mean besides a girl going missing and everyone pretending they weren't thinking about it while they argued over load weights? The manager's mouth tugged left, the face of someone who knows sarcasm is a shield but uses it anyway. We had a gate sensor glitch. We had a dolly go missing for a day and then show up like a turtle. We had a van come through off hours with a magnet sign I didn't recognize. I remember because the driver tried to be so normal, which is a kind of shouting. Magnet sign? He asked, pulse leaning forward. Fix it something. Community something. Those slogans are a disease, she said. I asked for paperwork. He had cash and a smile. I told him to turn around and come back with a name. He didn't. He sat at the overlook lot like a man who thought the city owed him a view. Pines, he said. Of course, she said. Where else do people think they become invisible? He walked the platform where trailers back in and hemorrhage. The concrete kept secrets and tire tracks and the glitter of 1,000 broken promises. Close to the edge, just under the lip where a dolly wheel would drop as it bounced, he found a blue shard. A serrated corner of heavy plastic the color of municipal crates. He rolled it in his palm, scuffed, old, stubborn like most fragments that survive decades. He bagged it. He took a picture with his phone against a ruler, the kind of glamour shot evidence deserves when it's finally being noticed. At the water plant, the graveyard operator let him in with a nod that said the city is family whether you like it or not. The backwash diagram hung above a console like a prayer in a language only the night shift spoke. We clear the intake screens at 2, the operator said, sipping coffee that had learned to hold a badge. Debris accumulates from the week. People throw what they can't carry. The river argues, we make it agree. Logs from August 98 say extended cycle, the detective said, holding up his copy like a relic. Debris that didn't want to let go, the operator said. I wasn't here then, but the old-timers told the story the way fishermen tell tides. Something on the screen that flexed. Not just bags and branches, like fabric, like straps, like someone packed a sorrow and sent it downriver to be baptized. The detective stood on the walkway above the intake and smelled metal, water, electricity, and the sermon of algae. He imagined a loop borrowing the city's own arteries, a van down a service lane, a dolly through a gate, a crate over a lip, water doing the final work that people won't name, logistics. He pictured the cousin drawing a straight line from edge to edge and teaching everyone else to read it. He went back to the station and opened the van man's ledger again, the one that began conveniently in 2001. He ran his finger under the neat columns and found nothing because the point was to find nothing. He called the widow from the nail salon and asked for the old appointment book again. August, the week after, the line where she had written Buzz Fix and then drawn a star. On the flip side of the page, a bleed-through of numbers. He held it to the light, to the window, to his patients. A phone number. The last digits matched the magnet's card. He smiled the way swimmers smile when a current yields. The van man sat back under the interrogation room's hum and drank his water the way a person drinks in church. Politely, quiet, aware of being watched. The detective showed him the transfer logs, the backwash note, the manager's memory of a magnet sign at a wrong hour, the blue shard of crate. The man looked at each like a patient studying lab results and waiting for his doctor to make them into English. You were there, the detective said. You drove the lane. You approached the gate. You thought better of it. You circled to the pines because the city taught you to. Did you move anything across that lip? The man's eyes misted. Not theatrical, not timed. I moved regret, he said. I moved other people's chaos. I have spent 20 years moving it, but that night, he placed his palm flat again as if his skin could unspool a tape. I didn't touch her. I touched the things that made touching her possible. That is my sin, and I have carried it like a tool I cannot put down. Help me, the detective said quietly. If the loop is real, if he engineered a route that murdered the center, where does the circle stutter? Where does the line he loves fail? The van man stared at the table, at the hairline scratches 100 interrogations had etched into its face. Straight lines fail at corners, he whispered. At corners you see who practices, you see who slows. He slowed by the cul-de-sac that night. He stood under the dead street lamp and smiled at his own reflection in the window. He touched the mailboxes in order. He turns order into ritual. He cannot resist marking things that already know their place. The detective saw the mailbox row, their thin red flags like a parade at ease. He remembered a faint smear on one, not swabbed back then, because the world had been lulled by bigger smears. He went out with a small kit and a quiet apology to the night. The family had replaced the boxes since, but the old ones lived in the father's shed, leaned together like veterans. He asked and received hands and flashlights and the authority of grief. In the shed, he lifted one, third from the left, and angled light across its flank. A fingerprint grew like a bruise under the powder, not legible, not crisp, but shaped with the same arch the cousin's thumb showed when he'd pressed it on the consent form just to show he wasn't afraid of paper. He photographed the ghost anyway. It wasn't evidence a judge would serenade. It was a hymn the case could hum. Back in the room, the cousin shrugged when shown the photo, then smiled as if complimented. We touch our city, he said. If you want to arrest everyone who fingers a mailbox, build a larger jail. We're building a larger story, the detective said. One that fits you. He pointed to the whiteboard circle, now crowded with arrows like a meteorology of intent. Help me trace the corner. The cousin's face flickered, a slide projector catching. He leaned back, laced fingers, stared at the ceiling until the room learned his pause. You think you can catch me with a shard and a schedule, he said. Maybe you can, but you won't locate her by walking in circles. I told you, the point is not the point. Then the loop has an exit, the detective said. One you control. Where? The cousin looked almost tender. The place you refuse to love because it ruins narrative, he said. A transfer station kills endings. A water plant sterilizes grief. A loop erases alters. That is why you hate it, and that is why we chose it. He expected triumph. He found weariness. The cousin's neat edges were fraying. The red dot blinked as faithfully as ever, indifferent to revelations. The detective stepped out and put his head against cool hallway paint, the way you do when you're choosing between roads you've already walked. He called Esquivel again. Tell me about dollies, he said. Esquivel laughed. They're like cats, he said. They go missing and then show up caked in someone else's story. We brand them with routes because drivers love to borrow. Why? The detective told him about the blue shard in the groove. Esquivel whistled. We had one dolly from Route 14B that came back with a cracked wheel in '98. The driver swore a truck rolled over it and then swore again he wasn't on that lane. I kept the wheel because I like souvenirs. He paused for effect. You want it? The wheel was in a cabinet, label crooked, fate straight. A chip gone from its rim matched the width of the groove he'd measured in the alley. The rubber wore a smear of something like old tape adhesive, like straps had once tried to hold something that didn't want to be held. He photographed. He bagged. He wrote the part number like a prayer and the route like a curse. He drove the loop then, end to end, alone, telling himself the narrative as he turned, letting the city answer with its architecture. Cafe, side door, service lane. Dolly's teeth in concrete. Transfer gate that remembers a magnet. Backwash that remembered fabric. Pines that remembered dust. Cul-de-sac that remembered a mailman's routine and a cousin's fingers. The loop didn't find a body. It found a system. It found a religion of control. It found the truth the headline refused to carry. Solved is a stamp. Proof is a route you can make 12 minds drive with you. He parked under the newly replaced street lamp and watched the porch light burn its stubborn square into the night. Less gold now, more amber, like an aging whiskey that's seen too many toasts. He pictured the stamp on the file. Cold case. Solved. The ink still wet. The corners curling because paper has memory. He pictured prying it up and writing smaller below it. Footnote. Loop. In the station, the DA met him with eyes that had not blinked in an hour. We can hold them on tampering, on obstruction, on false instrument, she said. We can lace the loop into a closing argument when the lab sings louder. The lab will never sing solos for this, he said, and it wasn't despair, not quite. More like respect for a riddle that didn't owe you music. But the city's own heartbeat will. The logs, the groove, the wheel, the wedge dust, the backwash note, the cousin's hand in lines, the van man's magnet at the wrong hour, the mailbox touch, 2 authors, 1 script, no altar. Jurors love altars, she said. Then we give them a pilgrimage instead, he said. We take them around and around until the route is the relic. She stared at the circle on the whiteboard, at the arrows like a school of fish. A loop, she murmured, almost like respect. Who thinks like this? People who want credit without the consequences of a center, he said. People allergic to shrines. People who believe in edits more than authorship. He looked through the glass at the cousin, who sat composed and faintly triumphant, and at the van man, who sat composed and faintly ruined. People who think solved is a word you can bend. The detective rubbed the marker from his sleeve, smearing black into gray. He was tired enough to taste metal, awake enough to hear the city turning in its sleep. Tomorrow, he said, mostly to the room, partly to the red dot. We take a jury for a drive. And elsewhere, higher than the transfer station's lights, the pines rehearsed their whisper. The overlook collected cars like secrets and let them go. The river chewed what it was given and pretended not to remember. The cul-de-sac yawned its practiced yawn. The porch light, stubborn, kept the square alive. The loop held, the loop waited. The line from edge to edge did what straight lines do. It tempted you to stop looking at corners. They don't teach you how to drive a jury. There's no handbook for pointing at corners and asking 12 strangers to feel the weight of a groove in concrete. But the judge signed the order with a pen that clicked like a gavel. Sight view approved, narrow itinerary, no stops unannounced. The bailiff rehearsed logistics. The DA rehearsed lines. The cousin smiled in his suit as if the courthouse were a showroom and he'd brought the premium trim. The van man sat 2 chairs away, cuffed in humility, staring at his own hands like they were a crime scene he didn't remember staging. The city watched the sidewalk cameras and pretended not to. We loaded them board by board, 4-person first, then the row of faces that would become the chorus to this town's next prayer. The bus smelled like vinyl, stale sun, nervous breath. The judge came along because the order said so and because leaving a narrative unattended on the road is how it goes feral. The detective stood at the front with a map he didn't need, a microphone he didn't want, and a voice he had trained over years to carry without swagger. We're taking you through a route, he said, not a speech, a weather report. Call it a circle, call it a script, watch the corners. We rolled. Headline cadence outside, quieter inside. The cafe flashed past, then returned in the rear view like a memory that refused to be edited out. He had them look at the side door, new paint, same bones, hinge that now behaved because history bullied it into manners. He had them stare at a photograph of the old wedge, the strawberry, projected on a portable screen rigged to the bus ceiling. The jurors glanced up as if the fruit might drop into their laps. A door, the DA said from the mid-aisle, isn't just a door when people want it to be a story. We turned into the service lane, narrow spine stitched behind the block, dumpsters lined like mute jurors of their own. The driver idled as the detective pointed to the concrete scars. 30 inches off the wall, he said. Regular, parallel, not a delivery truck's drift. A dolly wheel, over and over, a habit forged in repetition. Habits are signatures that don't need ink. Esquivel stood there with a spare wheel, the chip visible like a missing tooth. He held it up, a relic in fluorescent light. The jurors leaned despite themselves. One of them, the one with a notepad already full of words like maybe and doodled a circle with a notch. The cousin watched from the second bus, shackled in theory, his eyes doing math through the tinted glass. The van man watched the ground where his old routes had worn their catechism. He didn't lift his head when the detective tapped the window for emphasis and said, "Straight lines fail at corners." We moved again, past the alley's tired murals, past the gate where a magnet sign once tried to talk its way into legitimacy. The transfer station manager met them at the platform, her vest an apology and a warning. "Don't romanticize this," she told the jury, voice like gravel that had learned law. "Garbage is just what it is until someone makes it evidence." She showed them the lip where a crate's corner would hesitate before it surrendered to gravity. She showed them the blue shard sealed in its pouch. She didn't say the word body. Nobody did. The detective didn't have to. The wind from the trailers lifted the phrase and let it settle without printing it. Back onto the road, stoplights clicked through their liturgy. The water plant opened its gates with a squeal that used to belong to the cafe's hinge, a noisy little ghost that had found a new home. The operator on duty pointed at the schematic and the intake screen and the long throat where the river swallowed the city's days. "Backwash at 2, he said. "Always has been. That week, longer, debris that argued." The jurors stared at the water, a moving mirror that refused to confess. A woman in the back row lifted her sleeve to her nose as if something had just risen from a memory. We climbed to the pines last, because the detective knew better than to start there. Start with the view, and they'll spend the rest of the route grieving elegance. Save it for the end, and they'll hear the whisper. The overlook held its usual anthropology: love-carved bark, tire tattoos, a horizon pretending to be forgiveness. He had the bus stop, had them step down and feel gravel slide under shoes, had them look at the guardrail where initials believed in forever, and at the far edge where dust had once given up a key blank to a boot that rarely missed. The wind carried the city's low hum up the slope. Somewhere below, an ambulance yawned and went back to sleep. "Loops love 0, he told them, the cousin's line stripped of smugness and dropped as evidence. "This route isn't a path to an altar. It's an eraser. You don't get a shrine. You get a system." He let quiet do the next 30 seconds of work. The judge watched him instead of the view. The four-person's pen stopped mid-stroke, then drew a circle, then pressed a dot at the top as if to say, "This is where we came in." Back downtown, the microphones waited like flowers that bite. Community in shock, the lower thirds rehearsed for the evening news, even though the community had been practicing shock for 2 decades and was now fluent. Outside the courthouse, a handmade sign, "Solved" means what? Below it, a candle guttered in guilty daylight. The family came through the crowd with the air of people who'd learned to fold their faces into public shapes. The mother gave the detective a look that knew more than his file did. The father looked at the cousin and saw a man who had written in his house without permission. Inside, the DA made her opening the way you build a bridge of small things. She did not promise a body. She did not promise a solo from the lab. She promised a route. "We will show you a city that became a machine," she said. "We will show you the hands that tuned it. We will show you a note that could not have been hers, a wedge that learned too many rooms, a wheel that came back wrong, a straight line that rehearsed itself, a backwash that remembers." The cousin smirked with the confidence of a man who believes jurors are allergic to abstraction. The van man stared at the counsel table like it might bite him for not feeding it in time. The first witness was Tegan, pencil behind ear, even in court like an old scar you keep rubbing. She told them about the line on the receipt, the man who sat half a beat behind the room, the wedge swap, the hinge squeak that learned to behave only after the fire. She said the words, "Back soon, don't wait," and half the jury looked up because there is something about those 4 words that triggers the animal mind. Movement promised, stillness ordered. The defense tried to turn her into nostalgia. She held. Memory lies, she agreed, but patterns don't. Esquivel testified like a proud archivist whose boxes finally mattered. He talked dot matrix like it was poetry. He raised the cracked dolly wheel, and the jurors leaned again, not for drama, for the arithmetic of it. The transfer manager brought the blue shard and a voice salted by nights in math. The water plant operator read the log entry at 0211, and the courtroom made the sound rooms make when the air changes pressure. Then came the lab. Calm voice, sleepless eyes. The analyst who knew how to talk to 12 people without making them feel like a class. She put the straight-line screenshots up, the receipt, the cousin's notebook, the practice page from the recycle bin. She pointed to the micro-hitches. Not unique in the universe, she said, honest enough to be trusted. Unique enough in this room. The defense rose on that line like a surfer who sees the wave finally break. So it could be anyone, the cousin's attorney said cheerfully. Anyone who draws a line? That's not what I said, the analyst replied, and did what science does when it's tired of being translated. She slowed down without dumbing down. We are not saying a person is a printer. We are saying a person has a rhythm. This rhythm repeats. The defense pivoted to the smear on the linoleum, to the family tree, to the branch where cousin and van man hung leaves. Familial, he said, savoring the syllables. Close is not the same as true. The analyst nodded. Correct, she said, and then turned to the jury as if the rest of the room had temporarily ceased to exist. That's why you're going to drive the route in your heads even after the bus is parked. The van man took the stand with both hands visible again, palms waiting, a nonverbal confession to the god of thresholds. He spoke about hinges, about doors that forget their jobs, about swapping wedges because strawberry jokes don't hold. He admitted the cafe slip, back soon, don't wait, the way decent people admit small sins before they're accused of worse ones. The defense tried to paint him as the center. He refused gently to hold that brush. I fix things, he said. That's not a defense, it's a defect. I fix until I can't see what I've made possible. The cousin followed, summoned by a subpoena and his own appetite for performance. He sat with a posture that accused the bench of slouching. The DA held up the fridge note in its sleeve like a foundling. Is this your hand? She asked. He smiled like a man auditioning for charm and said, It could be, the way a magician says, pick a card, and makes your skepticism part of the trick. She didn't argue with the coy. She laid the practice pages beside the note. How many straight lines do you draw in a week? She asked. Enough to convince yourself that is truth. He tried to turn the room into a philosophy conference. She dragged it back with verbs, wrote, swapped, watched, waited, drove. The cousin's smile peeled, then reassembled, then peeled again. You're criminalizing neatness, he said finally, and it got a polite laugh from 3 rows back because even in trials the city likes a line. Not neatness, she said. Interference. You edited a life until it was easier to shelve. The family sat very still. The mother's hands clasped the way people clasp at the edge of pools. The father stared at the note and remembered a magnet. Grief is an economy. It knows the price of paper. Outside, the anchors practiced bombshell in the mirror just in case, stretching the vowels like taffy. Inside, the judge let the day end where it wanted. The jurors filed out with the look of people who had been told to carry a circle in their heads without spilling. The detective stood alone at counsel table with the relics of small things in front of him. Wedge dust, wheel chip, blue shard. Note, receipt, diary indentation rubbings, the photograph of the mailbox's ghost print, and felt for the first time not the weight of absence but the burden of design. Night threw its coat over the city. The porch light on the cul-de-sac held it square. The suspect in the other jail, the one who loved to watch, stared at a concrete ceiling that never remembered stars and muttered plural to himself, like a charm against the single word that had almost crushed him. In their cells, the cousin and the van man slept or pretended to. The cousin dreamed of lines that wouldn't hold. The van man dreamed of a door that stuck shut on purpose and saved a life and woke weeping without knowing why. The detective drove the loop again without the bus, without an audience, because this is how you keep faith with a case. Repetition until the road hums your name. Cafe, alley, lane, gate, platform, water, pines, cul-de-sac. He stopped at each beat and listened, because places talk after midnight when the microphones are bored. At the service lane, he heard metal remember. At the station, he heard the birds argue about breakfast. At the plant, he heard the throat of the city clear. At the pines, he heard teenagers rehearse forever in the bark. At the cul-de-sac, he heard a new street lamp click to rest and an old porch light refuse. Back at his kitchen table, he spread the timeline again, the circle in dry erase that had refused to be linear despite the marker's insistence. He added one word in the margin, why. He wrote it smaller beneath in a second hand, as if his doubt had scribbled a response. Because. He stared at both like they were children arguing in the back seat of a long drive. He put his pen down and let the silence talk. It said the thing he didn't want to hear. You might never get a body. You might never get a confession that sings in a single voice. You might only get a city taught to love corners. Morning arrived with teeth. The headlines tried out nuance like a new coat they weren't sure they would keep. Solved under review. Loop theory sparks outrage. Wedge evidence becomes center stage. Tegan hailed, Tegan hounded. A pastor wrote a letter to the editor that said grief is a staircase, not a door. A council member suggested a task force as if committees could audit fate. A kid from the old neighborhood made a podcast in one night and called it Don't Wait. The family unplugged their phone. In court, the DA moved to add counts: tampering with evidence, falsifying a public instrument, conspiracy to obstruct. The defense performed the ritual objection because that's the dance. Aloud, said the judge, the gavel a small thunder. The cousin finally frowned, a hairline crack in a statue. The van man closed his eyes. Then the detective did something no one expected, because that's sometimes the only way to keep a story from winning. He asked for the lights to be cut. The courtroom dimmed. He walked to the projector, placed the photograph of the note on the screen, flooded it with white, then turned the focus until the straight line blazed. He lifted a second slide, the receipt stripe. He overlaid them. Not perfect, not science fiction, just rhythm. Pressure rise, hitch, settle, exit. He didn't say match, he said familiar. He let the jurors' eyes do the rest. In the half-dark, the four-person's pen moved without looking. Circle, corner, dot. Back soon, the detective said into the dim like an anchor reading from an old teleprompter. Don't wait. He turned the lights back on before anyone could think he was making theater. He sat down. He let the collective heartbeat in the room decide what to call that. On recess, he walked the hallway and found the mother staring at the wall of donors, names engraved in brass. She touched one and asked, not looking at him, "Where do you put closure if there's no grave?" "In the root," he said, knowing it was unsatisfactory and also the only answer he had that didn't lie. "In the corners you teach yourself to see." She nodded like a person inventorying the weight she could carry versus the weight she must. "We'll learn the corners," she said, "but someone owes us a point." He said nothing because any promise now would be theft. He looked at the cousin through the glass, composed, arranged, a man who believed he had architected away altars, and at the van man, undone by his own helpfulness, a man who had never wanted authorship and yet found his fingerprints on the table of the city. He thought of the suspect in the other jail, who had spoken the word plural and felt the moral geometry of this place twist into a shape that juries don't love and journalists don't buy. That night, under the stubborn porch light, a neighborhood held its breath again, not because of sirens or shadows, but because memory, finally, had been given a map. Not a finish line, a loop, and somewhere, beyond the pines, beyond the plant, a stretch of water carried something the city wouldn't name, and the moon wrote a straight line across it no human hand could mimic. The detective stood in the crosshairs of two truths. Solved is a salve, proof is a pilgrimage. He chose the pilgrimage. He whispered the route like a rosary and listened for the one new sound he needed, the sound of a corner, learning how to turn against the man who had trusted it to stay loyal.